Okay, hi, this is Jim Cervantes. I'm the chair of the Cali Cafe. I'd like to welcome everyone to our September 21st meeting. I feel a bit like I'm on the bridge of the Enterprise, but I appreciate staff for arranging these facilities. They're really quite impressive. With that, I'd like to ask Melissa to call the roll, please.
Ms. Avila Farias. Here. Ms. Cabildo. Ms. Cabildo absent. Chair Cervantes.
Present.
Secretary Castro Ramirez.
Present.
Ms. Lamont. Here. Mr. Henning for Treasurer Ma.
Present.
Mr. Prince. I'm here. Mr. Russell.
Present.
Secretary Sin.
Present.
Ms. Sotelo. Ms. Sotelo absent. Mr. Velasquez.
Here.
Mr. White.
Present.
Mr. Williams.
Present.
Ms. Mirzazad for Mr. Asefa.
Present.
Ms. Miller for Mr. Steppenshaw. Ms. Miller is absent. Ms. Johnson Hall.
Present.
Chairman, we do have a quorum.
Thank you very much. I'd like to move to item number 2 on the agenda, which is the approval of the minutes from our last meeting, which is June 22nd. And I'd like to entertain a motion and a second to approve the minutes unless there are any comments, questions, additions, or deletions.
Motion to approve.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve
Second.
and a second. Thank you. And per our protocol, with a motion and a second, we deem the minutes to be approved. We won't take a vote on this. I'd like to, again, welcome you all to our meeting. Don't have a lot of new comments I'd like to add. I have been working over the summer to try to meet up with some of our board members. Director Prince and I got together in a midpoint between our respective locations.
Supposed to be just for breakfast, but I think it went to about 2 p.m.
Yeah, we had all the conversation. And I've also connected with, went to Los Angeles to connect with our board members there. And member Avila Farias and I got together as well. So I'm trying to sort of get a chance to get to know the board as well. And I have to say, I'm just really impressed with the depth of knowledge, expertise, and passion for affordable housing that this group brings, and the varied backgrounds as well. So it's been really a pleasure getting to know you all better. It's really, I think, an impressive group, and I think we're all really dedicated to furthering the mission that the governor's laid out to expand housing for Californians. So with that, let me turn it to our executive director for her comments.
Thank you, Chair Cervantes. I have some, and this is Tina Johnson Hall, Executive Director for Cali Cafe. I have some really exciting items to share, and I know we have some pretty big updates coming later, so let's get into it. First of all, I have a brief update on 2 of our most talked about programs, that being the California Dream for All, as well as the accessory dwelling units. With additional budget legislation having now been finalized and signed by the governor, we now have certainty that Cali Cafe is getting an allocation of $220 million for the Dream for All program and an allocation of $25 million for ADUs. I know all of you have heard so many times, just as I have, that these programs have made a huge impact on the communities that we serve, and so we are excited to get to work. You will hear more about these items later, about how we are applying our lessons learned, the new guidelines that come along with these allocations, and more. But I do want to say that we are very thankful to the governor and to the legislature for once again entrusting us to address these key areas of need in our state: supply, homeownership. I'm excited about that. Our Director of Strategy, Policy, and Legislation, Frances Marti, will give you a full rundown on the rest of the recent legislation and state budget impacts in a few minutes. But while I'm thanking the governor and the legislature, I am also very, very happy to applaud their work on passing SB 469, which eliminates the Article 34 voter threshold requirements for state affordable housing projects.
I'm just gonna get past that.
Correct. But when you talk about housing discrimination, I think we would all agree that has affected Californians the most for the most of the 20th century and continued on into 21st century. Article 34 is near the top of that list for sure. So to at least get an exemption for state affordable housing projects is a big, big step in the right direction that was long overdue. Moving on to another item that we will hear more details about later in the meeting, I must take a moment to show you all something. You're all probably aware that last month, CalHFA released its initial offering through our new affordable multifamily housing revenue bond indenture, which the board approved. Our Director of Financing, Erwin Tan, and special guest, Mr. Jeff Prue from our partners at Morgan Stanley. We'll have more on that in item 7. But what I wanted to show you all here at the top of the meeting is this very short video of CalHFA being featured in an unprecedented place and in an unprecedented way. So this is from August 24th when the sale closed. Let's take a look. CalHFA's brand in the middle of Times Square, which is incredible. I think that's the very first time that has ever happened in the history of CalHFA. And I think it's a landmark. It just shows people who we are, what we can do, what our abilities are, and our position as we develop new ideas, innovative ideas to address and create solutions for affordable housing here in the state of California. So thank you to all who participated in making that happen. It was an incredible moment. I personally got the chills. And it is one of those things that I think will stay with me for a very, very long time. Also pretty incredible, as I mentioned, is our fiscal year production numbers. So I want to share a little bit about that for you. So if you take into consideration our first-time home buyers, folks who received grants to start constructing ADUs, the units that our multifamily division committed to finance, what you get is a number for CalHFA creating housing opportunities in the number of 13,800 California households. That's unprecedented for us as well. That's a big number for us. Frankly, when I heard that, I had to pause for a minute to kind of let it sink in. For me, it's a blessing to be able to help nearly 14,000 families who are going to see their lives change for the better. That's a beautiful moment that I think we all should be happy about and embrace. When we sent out the press release, the news media also was quite impressed with our figures. Our own fabulous spokesperson, Eric Johnson, appeared on various segments in the news, ABC 10 News, Sacramento News, Fox 40 picked it up. Social media also picked it up and embraced it. And I would say handily that Eric did a great job. And we, again, as I mentioned, got a lot of good feedback. In addition to that, our own Rebecca Franklin, who is our Director of Risk Management and President of CalHRC, she's also been doing an incredible number of interviews promoting the Mortgage Relief Program. And with that program, we have now crossed the $500 million mark. That's huge. That's a lot of money going out to help folks who have had some challenges with paying their mortgages and other things associated with the mortgages here in the state of California. Those funds altogether have helped more than 20,000 Californians address COVID-related issues and hardships. So we're very happy about that as well. And then finally, I want to give the board an update on some stakeholder engagement work that I've been doing in the past few months. As you know, one element, an important element of our strategic plan, is to really lean into CalHFA's role as a trusted advisor. We want people to think about us when they're looking for solutions, when they're having challenges, or if they just want to talk. So as part of that, we are doing all that we can to speak to fellow practitioners, other partners all over the state to hear about those challenges that they are facing. We want to get a pulse on the market. I don't think you can, I think the secretary said in a meeting that I was in, you cannot talk to folks unless, you can't hear folks unless you are talking to them, right? So we want to get in their faces, talk to them, hear their challenges, make it personal. So I've made personal trips to the Bay Area. I've made personal trips to Southern California, Central Valley, and I'm planning to do a lot more of that, and so that we have an informed way of doing our business and channeling the work that we do, so we are hitting those folks who are most in need. So, in fact, I just drove down to Modesto to participate at the panel at the San Joaquin Valley Housing Collaborative annual conference. It was really good to hear from those folks. Tyrone, we spoke very highly of you. I just threw your name out there. And they love you there. But unique to the Central Valley is that it combines suburban and urban housing needs and rural areas. They serve the agricultural hub of California, which is the backbone of California. Our work, their work, and the conversations it was really quite robust. I enjoyed meeting those folks. I'm not from there. So for me, meeting those folks, hearing from them was very, very important and key to our work, I think. Additionally, a couple of our folks have been representing the agency at the League of California Cities at the conference that's happening right now as we speak. So we'll continue this work over the next few weeks. I, along with members of the staff, will be at MPH and the SCAMP conferences, as well as joining our own Stephen Russell at his San Diego Housing Federation conference. Then, as most of you know, we have a group headed to Boston for NCHSA annual conference. I'm very proud of the fact for the first time we are linked in arms with our lead organization, BCSH, who has agreed to join us there, along with our own chairman, Jim Cervantes. So this is going to be an exciting moment for us to hear. We're up for a couple of awards. Keep your fingers crossed. Let's keep our fingers crossed that we get something. But even if we don't, we think we have the right approach in working the way that we are working with our partners here in California. So with that, I know we have some important presentations coming up next, so I will turn it back to Chair Cervantes. Thank you.
Thank you, Executive Director Johnson Hall. It's been a busy couple of months. I'd like to turn to agenda item 4.
I'm sorry, just real quick. So
Yes.
Tina, I think the presence is fantastic. I, of course, want to invite you to San Jose. You haven't come there yet, so come join us. And one of the partners I think would be great for us to set up a meeting is with all of the housing authorities. And so we'd love to set up that phone call or meeting, whether it's the California Association of Housing Authorities. There's so much connection between our organizations, so I'd love to figure out how to make that happen. But I do appreciate the connections that you're making for CalHFA throughout the state and the listening tour that you're doing.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Director Prince. With that, I'd like to turn to agenda item 4. This is an update on the legislative session that just wrapped up with handled by our Director of Policy, Strategy, and Legislative Affairs, Frances Marti. We look forward to your update.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board, Executive Director, colleagues, members of the public. It's good to see you all in person today. My name is Francesc Martí, and I'm the Director of Policy, Strategy, and Legislation at CalHFA. And today I'll be presenting an update on the recently concluded state legislative session, emphasizing the bills that have direct implications on CalHFA. I'll also be covering another set of bills that have broader housing policy implications. And then I'll also cover some end of session budget legislation that Executive Director Johnson Hall mentioned that directly affects CalHFA's program, and that will actually provide a useful context for the Dream for All presentation that my colleague Ellen Martin will do following mine. So we'll go to the next slide now, and then next slide. So understanding the legislative process is understanding its calendar, right? And here we have a visual representation of the calendar, and the orange marker is where we are today, right? Which is exactly 1 week after the end of legislative session. And so leading up to the conclusion of this session, on the last day, the legislature voted on over 200 bills on that final day. In total, the session featured about 2,000 bills. So it's a really big volume that we've been seeing. And the bills passed on that last day are now awaiting Governor Gavin Newsom's signature. He has until October 14th to act on those bills, to sign or veto them, right? And it's also worth noting that we are in a 2-year legislative cycle. The legislative cycle started in January 2023. And this 2-year cycle, what it means is that next year, bills will keep their numbers. Bills that didn't get signed in chapter will keep their number, right? And if a bill didn't make it this year, we call that bill a 2-year bill. So we'll go to the next slide. So let's delve into the key pieces that did pass the legislature and have a direct impact on CalHFA. There's 2 significant bills affecting CalHFA directly that already got signed by the governor and have been chaptered. And Executive Director Johnson Hall mentioned one of them, which is SB 469. It eliminates the Article 34 voter approval process for state affordable housing projects, and that includes CalHFA's. And as many of you know, yeah, another applause. We can't give enough applause for this. And as many of you know, Article 34 is a pre-civil rights provision in our state constitution that requires voter approval prior to state and local government building what it said in the law is like low rent housing projects. No other state in the nation has a provision like this. And the provision has been a clear impediment to building more affordable housing. So, it's SB 469 being signed in chapter is extremely good news. The other bill affecting us directly that has been signed and chapter is AB 932 by Assemblymember Ting, and it requires CalHFA to conduct an evaluation of our ADU grant program by January of 2025. The bill provides us broad discretion on how to conduct such an evaluation. We'll go to the next slide. So now I'll turn to bills that do have a direct impact on CalHFA, but are awaiting the governor's action. They're on the governor's desk. There's 2 such bills. One is AB 519, which requires CalHFA to be part of a work group with our colleagues at HCD and our colleagues at TCAC and CIDLAC, and also with outside stakeholders to evaluate how to streamline and consolidate the process for applying to state multifamily housing financing, right? So we look forward to working with our colleagues at the other housing entities on that process. And AB 1508 is the other bill that's sitting on the governor's desk right now. And this bill, what it does is it incorporates an analysis of the homeownership landscape and of down payment assistance policies into HCD's statewide housing plan. And it does so in consultation with CalHFA. Obviously, the statewide housing plan is something that is HCD's function, but the bill does give a consultative role to CalHFA. So we'll move forward to the next slide. So now I'm gonna shift gears to bills that maybe don't mention College FA, don't affect us directly in the strict sense, but are of substantial interest to us from a broader housing policy standpoint. These bills touch on themes that are really relevant to our mission and to our goals and objectives. And first, we have a constitutional amendment, and just kind of a note on process on this one. Constitutional amendments don't go to the governor's desk. They are approved by a 2/3 majority in the legislature, and then they go directly to voters. And so ACA 1 lowers the voter threshold from 2/3 to 55% for local housing bond measures and also for certain local infrastructure process. Currently that 2/3 threshold for local bond measures leads to really tragic situations. I think there was one in Berkeley a few years ago where a housing bond measure failed with 60% yes votes, right? So this constitutional amendment is seeking to correct that, and it will, as I said, it's not going to the governor's desk. It goes directly to the ballot. It will be on the ballot on November of 2024. Then there's also a bill of interest to us that has already been signed and chaptered, and that is a bill that allows multiple localities to create a regional housing fund, JPA, without having to go to the legislature. In the past few years, the legislature has approved on a case-by-case basis a number of such entities, and so this kind of bypasses the kind of legislative approval process. And then we'll go to the next slide. So moving on, all the other bills of interest that I'm going to go over are sitting on the governor's desk. None of them have been signed and approved, and I classified them in different buckets or themes. And in the financing arena, there are bills that actually this one we already covered. The first one bypasses the governor's action, but there are bills that give additional powers to the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority. There are bills that allow state low-income housing tax credits to be paired with a 9% program instead of the 4% program, as is currently the case. That does not affect College FA's suballocation of the state low-income housing tax credit. And then there's also a bill that expands the welfare property tax exemption to affordable housing finance, affordable housing projects financed by 501c3 bonds. So we'll go to the next slide. So consistent with previous years, there's also been a big emphasis on land use and streamlining. So here we have a 10-year extension of SB 35 and an expansion of project streamlining to the coastal zone for the first time. We have a bill that creates a CEQA exemption for infill affordable housing projects that pay prevailing wage. You have a bill providing by right affordable housing development on land owned by religious institutions and independent higher ed institutions. And then the theme of ADUs also featured prominently this year. Obviously, it's of interest to us given that we have been running the ADU grant program. And the two bills that there's more bills in there, but the two bills that I'll highlight in that list is one by Assemblymember Ting that permits localities to pass local ordinances that would allow ADUs to be sold separately, right? That's a pretty major bill. And then there's another bill that requires localities to create ADU pre-approval plans. So that ADUs, once again, a big theme. And then we'll go to the next slide. I'd also like to note a significant two-bill package announced by the governor and the legislature last June. I think I mentioned it last time I spoke to all of you at that board meeting. And this package deals with the behavioral health treatment and housing continuum, right? These two bills, what they do is they modernize the Mental Health Services Act, and they include a large bond measure for next year's ballot to fund 10,000 new clinic beds and housing. So upon the governor's signature, both of these bills will go to the ballot in March 2024. So this is a major landmark in this arena. And then lastly, social housing was a big theme this year during the legislative session, right? It's featured prominently. And two bills, there were a few more, but like two of the bills did make it all the way to the governor's desk. And what these two bills do, they essentially direct the state to study the social housing model, both to kind of pilot it with three projects on surplus land, and also mandates HCD to conduct a study on it. So that's a broad overview of the themes we've observed amongst the bills that have passed. I'll just add that we'll be providing a comprehensive written report in October, which will also include the action that was taken on this large number of bills that are currently sitting on the governor's desk. So we'll know whether they've been signed or vetoed. Yeah.
President, I really do appreciate the presentation, bills tracking and of interest. It'd be helpful to know which bills the HCD, CHFA has decided to weigh in and offer support or oppose on in the future.
Yep.
I appreciate knowing about the mental health bills.
Yep.
That the governor has said that he is supportive of already. But when we're looking at all this, it helps to know which ones have a better than likely chance the governor may sign them.
Yes, yes, I am happy to incorporate that. Thank you for the suggestion.
Right. I know those positions oftentimes are hard to arrive at, but for ones that he has, it's helpful to know which
Yes, Executive Director Henning, thank you for the feedback. I look forward to incorporating that in the next presentation. And just kind of a note on our involvement in the process, like the first set of bills that I described with direct impacts on CalHFA, those are the ones where CalHFA is going to be weighing in more directly, right? The SB 469, right, that affects, it creates that exemption for us. There's the one about the ADU program evaluation by a semi-member thing. So those are bills that affect us directly and where we weigh in on more. The other ones are more of like housing policy interest. But I thank you for your feedback, and I will incorporate that in the next presentation.
So I wanted to just briefly touch upon social housing. So I have been studying social housing for at least 15 years, and I've been around the world to 12 countries looking at social housing. So I'm excited about looking at it. But I also know from all of the things I've done that the definition of social housing is changing or different for all kinds of people. And so I'm a little nervous around the implementation of this bill because I'm not sure that there's a clear vision of what social housing means. And I'm nervous about creating a whole new infrastructure. I think Tyrone and I would say there's a huge infrastructure of housing authorities, but there's a huge infrastructure of nonprofits. It's kind of confusing about why create a new infrastructure, and then DGS getting involved in housing makes me also concerned. We have a lot of people who are already doing housing. And so I'm curious about how that plays out. So I just wanted to throw that out there as that is piloted, that we really think about what makes social housing, what's the real concept behind it that we're testing, and what's the right ownership structure, what's the right delivery model. I mean, we all want to ramp up production, but I don't know if that's necessarily the right path. So just wanted to throw that out for us to be considering as, the Housing Finance Authority. It seems like having DGS step in is a little strange to me.
Yes, so thank you, Director Prince, for that comment. And I'll just note that that's an excellent point. And I'll just note that, in fact, the two bills that I mentioned, they each have a different definition. They each have a different definition for social housing. So, so just kind of to prove your point. But thank you so much. I don't know if there's any other questions before I move to the.
Other questions? Director Russell, comment. I don't see actually the ability to turn on my microphone by myself.
Seconds.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you. So yes, Director Russell speaking. I just wanted to call attention to a bill sitting on the governor's desk, SB 713, which was authored by Senator Padilla, freshman Senator Padilla, that would reaffirm state supremacy over local limitations on land use when it comes to density bonus. In particular, we've had conflicts with locally applied coastal height limits and state applied coastal height limits. And the city made a finding, actually, I think the state attorney made the finding that, in fact, that the state law does supersede. But for clarity in the laws, for the sake of development, that 713 did pass unanimously. out of the assembly, and is sitting on the governor's desk, and would actually help make sure that in those coastal adjacent areas that we would in fact be able to rely on density bonus law, creation of new affordable housing in those areas, and not be limited by local ordinances. So I think it's a very important bill.
Thank you, Director Russell, and we'll definitely be including that bill in the REN report that we'll be providing to the board in October.
Let's see if there's any other questions on general legislation. Around? Don't see any.
Thank you, and now we'll switch gears again, and we'll discuss some end of session updates to the state budget affecting College FA. So I think some of you may be thinking, I thought the budget was wrapped up in June, and that is true. The state budget was formally adopted in June, but we did observe some notable budget legislation at the end of legislative session that modifies that June framework, including modifications to College FA's programs. So this visual represents this end of session phase we just wrapped up, where there is still a chance that there can be some trailing budget legislation. We'll go to the next slide. So two significant end of session bills, SB 104 and SB 143, have implications on College FA, right? Both of these bills have already been signed by the governor, and SB 104 is what we call a budget bill junior, which means that it modifies funding amounts in previous budget acts. This bill modifies College FA programs in two ways, which are represented here visually in this slide. And the first one is it reduces ADU funding from 50 million, which was in the June budget, to 25 million in this budget bill junior. So it's a reduction of 25%. The legislative expectation is that this 25 million that it be used to continue the existing ADU grant program. And the legislature has also requested that we lower, that the only change that we do here, continue the grant program, but that we lower the income limit for the program. And so the other funding change that we see in the budget bill junior is an increase to the Dream for All amount from 200 million to 220 million. So with that, we'll move to the next slide. So we covered the budget bill junior and the funding changes. The other bill, SB 143, is what we call a budget trailer bill, which implements budget-related statutory changes. This bill has two key provisions related to the Dream for All program. And first, it directs College FA to make adjustments to the program ahead of the phase 2 of the program, right, to achieve the following objectives. And the trailer bill lays out those objectives, and they're targeting first-generation home buyers, supporting geographic balance in the state, and then prioritizing participation of home buyers in the lower tiers of the income spectrum. So my colleague Ellen Martin will be providing you a full update on our proposed approach to implementing this direction that the legislature has provided. The second provision in the trailer bill that affects College FA is a provision that directs us to evaluate options on how an annual continuous funding for the Dream for All program could be provided at scale, right? And it includes, and the evaluation should include the study of various bond financing mechanisms, right? We'll be reporting conclusions of such an evaluation to the legislature by March 2024. So I think this last part of my presentation sets the stage for the Dream for All approach that my colleague Ellen Martin is going to be presenting on. But I'll stop my presentation here, and I'll open up to any questions that you may have.
So as the board got any questions or comments on the state budget part, the next agenda topic is all about Dream for All. So I think maybe if we want to get into that, we hold those. But if there's any other questions, comments, insights?
Just a celebration on the funding of the two programs.
Yeah.
So that deserves another round of applause.
I understand at different points there was a bit of a Pearls of Pauline where the number for some of these programs was zero.
Yes, for the ADU program, the first iteration that was made public of the budget bill junior had that funding at zero. And then it was amended pretty late in the process, and 25 million was restored. So it was a little bit of a roller coaster for ADUs, but yeah.
So this program is a bit like Lazarus.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marti. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Make a
Yeah,
comment,
one-
Mr. Chair. Just want to make sure that I'm, can you all hear me? No.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Just a quick comment about the governor's commitment to continuing the momentum on increasing the supply of housing beyond, and Francesca, thank you so much for both presentations, specifically related to the budget, beyond the funding that Francesca highlighted, that is specific funding for the ADU program and the homeownership program, the Dream for All program. There's also $1 billion in the budget for another round of housing and homelessness assistance programs. These are grants that go to cities and counties and continuums of care. Very much, we're still laser focused on working with local leaders to address the housing insecurity and housing affordability issues, but also very much working with county systems to leverage the services component to ensure that as people move from exiting homelessness and move into more stable housing environments, that they have the supports, the wraparound supports necessary. And so just kudos to the governor and to the legislature for their ongoing commitment. And of course, there are a number of other programs that were funded under HCD. And so overall, just a continued focus on addressing the housing supply issues of our state. The last point that I will make, we're very grateful to the legislature for their support of SB 326 and AB 531. These two bills, these two companion bills, will enable the state, again, to more holistically address the housing and services need of individuals that are experiencing homelessness, individuals that also are struggling with behavioral health challenges and require a different level of support. We're excited that SB 326 has a 30% set aside for housing and services. And as Frances mentioned, AB 531, just over $6 billion of funding for housing, includes $2 billion of the $6 billion for permanent housing. And that would be, of course, a partnership between HCD and the California Veteran Affairs Agency, Secretary Sen, in terms of $1 billion going for veteran housing and $1 billion going towards permanent housing. So again, we know we have a deficit in terms of housing that's affordable, and the state is continuing to lead and to do everything possible from a policy perspective, but also from a funding perspective.
Thank you very much, Secretary Castro Ramirez.
One last comment, I'm sorry.
Director Prince, back again.
As a creature of federal policy, for the most part, what happens at the state is confusing and confounding to me. I just have to admit that. And yet we're really local creatures as well. And right? I mean, it's just a very, and Lourdes and I were talking earlier. I mean, if you go back and you look at the tax cuts that happened in the 1980s, it cut the federal budget by 60% at HUD, right? And that has never grown back. It stayed at that 60% cut. If it had been fully funded the last 35 or 40 years, it would have been 1.2 trillion more invested, right? I think I did the math. I think that would have been, I think we're 10% of the population, so 120 billion more in California. That would have been amazing, right? So there is this gap that's happening at the federal level. And then, as I said, what happens at the state is so confusing. So there was a AB 653, which was, I think it was called like a Section 8 accelerator program or something like that, was, I think, a misunderstanding of what housing authorities like either our performance in the past, what our capacities are, the limitations we face. And that misunderstanding, I think, kind of plays out in this disconnect that's happening as all of this legislation is proposed. And so I guess my question would be, is there a role for HFA or HCD for us to come together and kind of like figure out how do we actually put this? Because I feel like all we do is we keep responding to ideas coming from the legislators. Is there a way for us to take a little bit more of a lead in, and it can't be housing authority, right? CAHA, the California Association of Housing Authorities, it feels like we're always responding as opposed to figuring out how to lead in the conversation, make sure the data that we know is out there is being used appropriately. And I just throw it out there as like, it feels, confounding about like how to deal with it all. And I totally appreciate how California is stepping in where the federal government has failed the last few decades. It just seems like there's like a lot of knowledge that we could be bringing to help with that process. And I don't know how to do that. I'm just throwing it out there that I would love for us to figure out a way to make legislation be more directed based upon the data that we know works.
The table, with the executive director, we've been sort of ruminating on sort of this annual workshop concept and something like about what is to be done, or what's the role we could take, what are ideas that we can maybe bring to fruition. Is sort of like in that basket, which I think dovetails with your comments, Director Prince. That would be probably something I think on the earlier side of 2024. But yeah, I think that's an important topic area we want to keep our eye on that ball. Secretary?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that's an excellent point, Preston, that it is important for us to figure out a way to ensure that there's good data and good information to help inform some of the legislative proposals that are making their way. And I think on the positive side, the fact that we have so many housing-related legislative proposals is a reminder that we're finally addressing the housing issues the way that they should be addressed. But it also now puts a little more pressure, not just on the administration, but also local leaders, right? To be able to engage in a conversation where you're using evidence or data or pointing to projects that are actually making a difference to help inform and shape those legislative proposals. And just, kind of speaking very much from the administration, right? When the bill makes its way to the governor's desk and the governor signs or decides something else, if he signs, right, it moves into implementation to the executive branch. And so we're responsible for making sure that those programs, those dollars are getting out as quickly as possible, and that there's a level of assessment and evaluation in terms of the impact that they're having. I will also say that I think our departments have been doing a much better job in terms of making information available about how those dollars are being leveraged, the number of units that are being created, the affordability. And so to the extent that we can also maybe do more to arm local leaders. But I would agree, Chair. I think that this is an excellent point to discuss as CalHFA continues to look at ways to be more strategic or to build on the progress that CalHFA has already undertaken.
Thanks.
Yes, great, thank you.
Thank you, that's a good. Any other last questions for Mr. Marti? Thank you so much. Very thorough briefing, really appreciate that. And we're going to move to agenda item 5 now, which is an update on the California Dream for All program. Ellen Martin, please take it away.
All right, good morning. Can you hear me okay? Good. All right. Well, good morning, Chair Cervantes and members of the board. My name is Ellen Martin, and I am CalHFA's Director of Home Ownership. And as the chair stated, I'm here today to give the board an update regarding implementation of the next phase of the Dream for All program. So if we could go to the first slide. Thank you. So as a reminder, the Dream for All program offered a revolving shared appreciation loan program that provided loans for down payments to qualified home buyers. And then when that borrower sells or otherwise transfers their home, the home buyer will repay the original down payment loan plus a share of the appreciation in the value of the home. So if a home buyer takes out a shared appreciation loan for 20% of the home purchase price, they would then pay back that original loan amount plus 20% of any appreciation in the value of their home. Next slide, please. So phase one of the Dream for All program was available to first-time homebuyers at or below CalHFA's existing income limits. They were eligible for a down payment assistance loan up to 20% of the home purchase price, and that loan could be used for down payment, or it could also be used to fund closing costs, including interest rate buydowns. As I stated, it is then repaid upon resale or transfer of the property, at which time the appreciation is split between the homeowner and the program on a pro rata basis, with a more favorable share for our low-income borrowers. And then the program also instituted a cap on the amount of appreciation the program could receive, which was equal to 2.5 times the shared appreciation loan amount. Next slide, please. So just a quick review and update regarding phase one outcomes. I'll go into some more detail later. But we had about 2,500 total Dream for All reservations occurring in 53 of the state's 58 counties. Most of these loans have closed, with just a few loans for new construction still outstanding because those homes have to be completed before the borrower can close on their home. Our pull-through rate was very strong. We had an 87% pull-through, meaning only about 13% of Dream for All loans canceled or fell out during the escrow process. That's a much better pull-through rate than we typically see in our programs. Typically, we're closer to a 70% pull-through rate. So we were glad to see these loans close at a much higher rate, but I think we can also understand that there were significant incentives to close these loans given the nature of the funding availability. The average Dream for All loan amount was about $113,000, and that corresponds to an average home price of $567,000, so significantly lower than the median home price that we see across the state. Currently, median home prices are well in excess of $800,000. At the time that we launched Dream for All, I think median home sale prices were in the $750 to $770 range. Next slide, please. So for Dream for All Phase 2, Francesc offered some highlights, which I'll add to. We have about $255 million in funding available. So that includes both the $220 million in the current budget allocation that Francesc highlighted, as well as fallout funds from Phase 1. So based on the average loan amount from Phase 1, we estimate that funding will allow us to make an additional 2,000 or so Dream for All loans. So with consideration to the trailer bill language that Francesc highlighted, and also based on feedback that we've heard from this board and other stakeholders, these are the key goals and objectives for Phase 2. Number one is we want to provide potential homebuyers more time to access the program. We want to maximize the opportunity to bring in new buyers, those that really didn't think that they could be in the market for homeownership, and bring those buyers in off the sidelines. We're looking to narrow the program eligibility to target the Dream for All funds to those who need them the most. And one of our biggest goals in Phase 2 is to increase the program uptake in the Black and African American community, and to maintain the solid Phase 1 performance that we saw in the Latino, AAPI, and tribal communities. In Phase 1 of the program, we saw significantly improved uptake in areas that we typically struggle to serve with our down payment programs. That includes Los Angeles, the Central Coast, Orange County, and San Diego. In Phase 2, we want to build on that uptake and continue to see improvement in our ability to serve those areas. And then finally, separate from these programmatic initiatives, we will also conduct a study to identify the full suite of available financing options in keeping with the trailer bill requirements. Next slide, please. So with consideration to these goals and objectives, there are really three primary categories of program calibrations that we're looking at. The first is a major change to the way that CalHFA delivers its loan programs, designed really to slow the process down and give borrowers more time to get out and shop for a home. That change in the delivery system will then also allow us to design and conduct an upfront and extensive marketing and outreach program to reach the targeted communities that we want to reach with this program. And then finally, because the program is so oversubscribed, I think it's appropriate and necessary that we look at narrowing the eligibility criteria with a particular eye towards serving those first generation and low income borrowers. If we could go to the next slide, please. So the next few slides in your packet were not originally included in your packet. They are new. We've been working very hard since the trailer bill language was signed to develop some more specific proposed program calibrations, and then also to socialize those proposals with the administration and the legislature. So I'm very happy to be able to share these additional details with the board today, but I do apologize that we weren't able to get these specific details into your packet. And I also want to note that while much of what I'm about to discuss is really framed around the trailer bill requirements, these calibrations are really representative of feedback that we've heard from the board and from other stakeholders since the program launched earlier this year. So I'm hoping that you as a board see your feedback and see your input reflected in a lot of these calibrations that we're bringing forward today. So first, I'd like to dig in on the proposed changes to the loan delivery system. What we're proposing here is to establish a pre-registration portal for Dream for All that would allow borrowers to secure a Dream for All reservation voucher, if you will, before entering into a contract to purchase a home. So overall, as I said, the registration system is really intended to increase the time that borrowers have to access the program. We'd like to do better than 11 days. We want to slow down disbursements over time, and we want to ensure that the program is not only serving buyers that are already on the cusp of purchasing a home, potentially without the Dream for All assistance. So the portal would be open for a specified period, and prospective borrowers would have until such time as the portal closes to get all of their application and eligibility information into the system. Then after the portal closes, we will screen for eligibility and select borrowers that receive a Dream for All reservation voucher through a randomized lottery that would also establish and allow us to establish a wait list at that time. So selected borrowers would then have an opportunity to shop for a home. They would have a set and defined period of time during which they could go out, shop for a home, and make their loan reservation in CalHFA's system, much the way the current loan reservation process occurs now. So this change to our system is I think, quite important and integral to achieving our phase 2 objectives, including our ability to accommodate trailer bill requirements, including the first generation home buyer criteria, geographic set-asides, and targeting of lower income home buyers. So I'll discuss each of those in the coming slides. If we could go to the next. So starting with first generation, in alignment with what we understand to be the legislative intent, we propose to make this program open to first generation home buyers only. For phase 1 of Dream for All, about 49% of our primary borrowers attested under penalty of perjury that they were first generation home buyers. So we do feel very confident that we can tap into a deep market of first generation home buyers in California. Our working definition of a first generation home buyer is shown on this slide. We're looking at borrowers that have never owned a home in the United States and whose parents or legal guardians have not owned a home in the United States in the last 10 years, and or the borrower grew up in foster care. So first generation eligibility would be established via an attestation under penalty of perjury. And as part of implementation, we'll be working to establish audit procedures and to identify the avenues of recourse that we have available to us should we find that a borrower illegitimately accessed the Dream for All program under the first generation criteria. Next slide, please. So in order to fulfill the legislative direction that the program support an equitable distribution of program funds in different regions of the state, we intend to use the pre-registration system to account for and to manage geographic set-asides. The pre-registration vouchers would be awarded by region in a manner proportionate to the number of households in that region. And it's really important to note, I think this is key, that the set-aside would be based on where the borrower currently lives, but they would be able to use that voucher to purchase a home in any county where they qualify based on the income criteria in each county. Next slide, please. So it is important to note, and I think acknowledge at the outset, that this shift to geographic set-asides will have an impact on the demographics of CalHFA borrowers. I think as the board is aware, most of our programs are typically concentrated in the Central Valley, the Capital Region, and the Inland Empire. And Dream for All was also overrepresented in each of those regions. So as we look to concentrate more funds in the underrepresented regions of San Diego, Orange County, Central Coast, and most notably Los Angeles, we should anticipate that the composition of our borrower population will look more like that of the state as a whole. And that's what we've shown on this slide highlighted in blue. All that said, there also will be an impact on borrower demographics resulting from the narrowed eligibility criteria that we're proposing, which is outlined on the next slide. So let's go there. So the final requirement of the trailer bill requires CalHFA to adjust our eligibility criteria to prioritize participation by home buyers in the lower tiers of the income eligibility structure. So we're looking at 3 key changes to address this requirement. The first is a reduction in income limits from income limits that are based on 150% AMI to income limits that are based on 120% AMI. So that results in about a 20% reduction in the income limits for most counties, and we have a few key examples highlighted on this slide. We're also thinking about and would welcome feedback from the board regarding whether those income limits should be higher in certain really hard to serve areas like LA, where we see our programs struggling to perform because home prices so outpace median incomes, and would recommend that the program maintain flexibility to raise income limits should we see that uptake in a particular region is inadequate. So we would propose to use the pre-registration system to ensure that we maintain that flexibility to respond to ever-changing market conditions. Secondly, the shared appreciation loan amount would be capped at the lesser of 20% of the home sales price, or $150,000. And then finally, we propose to impose a minimum cumulative loan to value ratio, or CLTV, of 95%, which effectively means that a borrower would only be able to bring 5% of their own cash as down payment. So they'd only be able to bring about 5% of cash to the deal, which means that we're really helping to target these funds to those borrowers that don't already have the means to make a substantial down payment. And this is a tool we've used with great success in other CalHFA down payment assistance programs, where we wanted to make sure that we were incentivizing use of the program by folks that don't have other means to make down payments. We estimate, based on these changes, that most home sales through the program will be limited to less than $800,000, which is another avenue by which we will be targeting lower income households through the program. Next slide, please.
I'm sorry, can you go back to that slide real quick?
Mm-hmm.
So I know Santa Clara is the outlier, right? Our median household income, I didn't think it was 200,000, but I thought it was like 180,000 or something like that. So, the home price, the average home sales price now in Santa Clara County is $2 million, right? And so I think it's really interesting to think about how do you serve the lower AMI, but by increasing it, doesn't necessarily get down to the low AMI households that we need to be helping, right? And so, right, going up to 150% because you're not having the absorption or whatever the right word you're saying, doesn't necessarily get to those households in Santa Clara that are making, $50,000 a year and still want an option and a chance, and are just totally not only priced out because homes are at 2 million, but then like this program won't even try to serve them, right? And so I just kind of throw it out there of like, it seems to me as we want to figure out how to get to the lower AMI, we should figure out how to get to the lower AMI, not like say, let's just go higher. Does that make sense? Is that, I don't know if I'm capturing it the right way.
I do, and thank you so much for that comment. I think you're right. I think what we want to first try to do is see what sort of market uptake that we get at the lower AMI. That will be coupled with an aggressive marketing and outreach strategy. That will also be coupled with our NMS counseling program, whereby we're trying to help lower income borrowers get mortgage ready and access the availability of programmatic assistance. And so I think you're absolutely right that is sort of the first tier of assistance that we want to provide. Like with all our down payment assistance program, we do want to make sure that we have and continue to consider the need to maintain the flexibility to respond to market conditions.
I also, I think as we explore in Santa Clara about how to do home ownership at a very low income level, that one of the things that it is requiring is participation of the housing authority with vouchers, right? With that, instead of rental assistance, it's home ownership assistance. And so I guess I would love to, again, Tina, as we think about having a conversation with CAHA, it's like this conversation about how do we, and I get it that the demand for vouchers is like 5 times what we have available. So I'm all of a sudden now saying, hey, maybe we can help. But I feel like if we want to demonstrate that we can get down to that deeply affordable income level, that maybe we need to explore some additional partnerships. And also then give a shout out to the idea of like, let's pass something at the state level that allows the state to do long-term rental assistance agreements, right? That can't just be the federal assistance. But I just find this really interesting to think about how do we get deeper income targeting.
And it's a particular challenge in Santa Clara, where I think in August, the median price of an existing single family unit was $1.8 million. So it's a very unique challenge.
The average mortgage payment in Santa Clara County is over $10,000 a month. That's the average mortgage payment, right? It's like astounding to think about those numbers when you want to also then, as I said, we have, so again, it's such a unique place. We have the highest concentration of super wealthy in the world, right? But that doesn't, and that then skews our income levels. I remember when we had the economists here a year or two ago and we talked about that. I feel like our wealth does skew the AMI. So we have a bunch of people who are working really hard. They're at $30,000, $50,000 a year household incomes, and we're just not serving them. And it's like, we say, well, 80% of AMI or 120% of AMI is our target, but that's just such a small number of the really, those really in need or deserving in our community, or if the right word is. So I find this interesting to think about how do you get there, but I'm not quite sure I agree with the idea of lifting the AMI target. My own 2 cents worth.
All right, I appreciate those comments. Any other questions before I move on?
I second what Kristen mentioned. I think it's really valuable to think about how you can reach lower AMIs. Potentially adding targets for each of tiers would be a good way to target. Like, these are the targets that we have for each of these tiers, and kind of like report back on where you are when you roll out the program.
Absolutely. Yeah. To that point, we did have targets of, 10% under 80 AMI for round 1 of the Dream for All program. We shattered that. We came in with about, I think, 22% of under 80% AMI borrowers. And I think you're absolutely right that we should have similar targets as we move into phase 2. So I appreciate that comment. Thank you so much.
When the presentation's done also.
All right, so let's move on to the next slide in that case. So, we've started this, but in terms of next steps. Today, we are looking for feedback from the board regarding the calibrations that we've shared today. Over the next month or so, we will be working with our partners in the administration and the legislature to review and discuss these and potentially other calibrations. And then we'll return to the board in October, at which time we anticipate having final program parameters and an implementation timeline. And we will be seeking an action from the board at that time to appropriate the funds for phase 2 of the program. We will also at that time provide a full overview of the marketing and outreach strategy. As we move on to the next slide, in your packets, we've included an updated version of all of the statistics and demographics from phase 1 of the program. This is an update of the material that I reviewed back in May and thought that it would be helpful for the board to have in front of you for today's discussion. We've really focused on ensuring that all program calibrations and changes that we bring to you are data-driven, and this is representative of a lot of the work that we've done to understand the dynamics of phase 1 and how we might calibrate and change our focus for the upcoming phase. So I am more than happy to run through the next few slides quickly if that would be of assistance to the board, or I'm happy to take questions at this time.
As much as 6 months ago, I'm thinking it might be a quick walkthrough, and then we can get to questions.
Okay.
I just have a quick clarification. I think you can answer this real quick. You mentioned administration and legislature. We, at the treasurer's office, appreciate the Newsom administration, but we're a separate entity. I imagine you're also going to consult with us.
The treasurer is a very important
Thank you.
participant in this process. Yes.
We appreciate the Newsom administration adopting the Vermont Treasurer's Office as much as possible.
We'll give credit where credit is due.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much. So I'll work really quickly through these slides. This slide, actually, if we go back one slide. So this slide shows the average Dream for All sales price as compared to the median home prices in each region in April. So what this shows is that in all regions except the Central Valley, which has the lowest median home price in the state, the average Dream for All home price was well below that regional median value. So let's go to the next slide.
The average loan was higher than the median price. Do you know why?
I suspect that it has to do with the propensity of new construction units and also the relationship between CalHFA income limits and the median home value. So I think because the CalHFA income limits are sufficient in the Central Valley to purchase a $429,000 house, I think folks are able to sort of move up in terms of the housing stock, and perhaps even, I think a lot of the inventory that's on the market is new home construction, which is going to be more pricey.
And the way you divide up the states, is this a traditional thing?
These are the TCAC regions,
okay.
Yeah.
I've seen the state divided in different areas.
There's many different ways to do it. We tried to do it in a way that would be familiar to folks, but also happy to take input on, if you think there should be different considerations here. Okay, so moving on to the next slide. So here we offered the board some information regarding the CalHFA lender network. No real updates here. A couple key notes. We have a robust network of over 130 lenders throughout the state. A borrower can contact a CalHFA lender no matter where they live, but it is worth noting that 54 of the 58 counties in California are included in a preferred lending officer's primary territory. Over 60% of our preferred lending officers speak Spanish, and we also have loan officers that speak Tagalog, Vietnamese, Hindi, Punjabi, and Arabic. Next slide, please. So this slide shows DFA borrowers for phase 1 by race and ethnicity. As you'll recall, over 55% of our borrowers self-identified as belonging to communities of color, and 34% of our borrowers identified as non-Hispanic or Latino white borrowers. Next slide, please. So here we have a little bit more context, and in my view, this slide is really key in terms of the program calibrations that we're making. This chart compares the composition of Dream for All loans by race and ethnicity to the composition of households and homeowners in California. So this really underscores that we saw Dream for All outperform in most communities of color, but not in the Black community. So here we saw the share of Dream for All borrowers that identify as Black or African American fall below the share of Black and African American head of households. So I think a key challenge that we had in phase 1 of the program in terms of serving the Black homebuyer community really lies in the velocity with which the funds went out. And so a lot of thinking that's gone into our program calibrations and specifically the pre-registration process is looking to address this challenge, to kind of slow down that reservation process and make sure that we're offering equitable access to the program. Geographic set-asides, I think, will also help by ensuring that counties like LA receive a commensurate share of the funding. And then, of course, our marketing and outreach program, I think it goes without saying, but it will absolutely be laser focused on outreach to BIPOC communities with the express intent of improving those statistics. Next slide, please. So Dream for All did in fact serve much lower incomes than our typical down payment assistance programs. Nearly 40% of our Dream for All borrowers earned less than $100,000. Over 60% earned less than $125,000, and nearly 80% of our Dream for All borrowers earned less than $150,000. And as I had mentioned previously, about 22% of our borrowers earned less than 80% AMI. Next slide. So these are my final few slides, I promise. These will focus in on geography, on evaluating where those phase 1 Dream for All loans went. Some key points, as we've stated, the Central Valley, the Inland Empire, the capital regions all remain dominant for phase 1. Housing affordability has always driven much of our program activity to those regions. We did see a significant share of loans that went to the Bay Area, I think really improving our ability to help low and moderate income Californians access housing in those high cost areas. And we did see notable gains in the share of loans that went to those other high cost areas like San Diego, Los Angeles, Central Coast, and Orange County. There's really 2 key factors at play, absent geographic set-asides, that drive where our loans go. And that has to do with home values. We see more loans happen where homes are more affordable to borrowers at our income levels, and inventory. We see more loans occur where counties offer a greater inventory of homes, particularly homes that are affordable to our borrowers. Next slide, please. So sort of digging into that regional level data, we saw a significant share of DFA loans in those in the Central Valley, Inland Empire, Capital Region, due primarily to more affordable home sale prices and a greater inventory of homes for sale. With the geographic set-asides that we're proposing in line with the trailer bill legislation, we will see those shares come down. We saw more Bay Area residents served by DFA than many other CalHFA down payment assistance programs. Their share of DFA loans, though, still did not surpass their share of California households, but it approached it. And then the share of Dream for All loans in Los Angeles, San Diego, Orange County, and the Central Coast were lower than their share of California households, due primarily to the high home prices that we see and low inventories. With the set aside, the intent is to pull those numbers up in these regions so that those regions, or at least borrowers that are currently living in those regions, receive a commensurate share of the programmatic assistance. Next slide, please. So the next 2 slides show the relationship between our loan activity and affordable home prices spatially. So on the left here, we have counties that saw more Dream for All loans, and on the right, we have counties where homes are relatively more affordable to CalHFA borrowers. And so you can see that there is really a significant relationship in terms of where more loans occurred and where homes are more affordable to CalHFA first-time homebuyers. Next slide. And then this slide again shows the inverse. So here on the left, counties with fewer Dream for All loans are highlighted compared to the right, where homes are less affordable. Again, I think the relationship here is pretty clear. Where homes are less affordable, we saw fewer Dream for All loans. And even in some counties where homes are more affordable, low transaction activity and inventories held down Dream for All activity. And with the next slide, that wraps it up for me. And at this time, I'm happy to take any remaining questions that the board may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burrow. So we'll have board member questions and comments. And then I'll have open the open it up to public comments. We've already received some, I think, at this point. So with that, board member questions and comments. Director Williams.
First, I am really appreciative for the presentation and for the plan for moving forward. I think the ability to kind of pre-register is a huge game changer across the board, regardless of what region. Because what we're finding is oftentimes by the time a person actually finds a home, all the money's gone and they're left holding the bag. So they've looked for 2 or 3 months, scouring the landscape, only to find out just about the time they can get it under contract, the funding is not there. So to be able to do that, I really think is thoughtful, and it will be a huge game changer in the ability for those who need more time. As we talk about these communities where we have astronomical home prices versus the actual income of a person to find a home in that price range, I think what we've got to also look at is just that, what you said, the inventory. I think the first round, it'll be interesting to see about the second round. I think the first round, could have wiped out a lot of that affordable inventory, and that's what led to the quick use of the funds. What we're seeing in the Central Valley is that many of those home builders are putting the brakes on their new construction, that the interest rates have continued to remain high compared to past years. And so builders are unclear about moving forward. And so if you look at new home construction, it is pausing. What we saw in round one was the ability to help sell off the inventory that had been sitting there. Now that in many cases, that inventory is no longer on the market, even fewer units are now being constructed in that price range. And it'll just be interesting to see, what's even available. But I am very appreciative to your adjustments. California is a hard place for people who are entering the market at the 80% AMI to really find a decent home. It's just the fact. And I don't know that that's going to change anytime soon. But I do think that this program has proven to be incredibly successful. And I know that there are realtors all over the state who are waiting with bated breath for this to be released. And I know that it won't serve everyone. I do appreciate the focus or the understanding that the African-American market has not been participating at a level that we're all pleased with, and that you're making accommodations for that. I do think that connecting to untraditional sources for marketing will be incredibly helpful. I know we're CalFHA, but the Federal Home Loan Bank has a Black Homeownership Initiative, and where it is allocated $1 million for counseling agencies, home buying counseling agencies that reach out and target African-American families. The ability to connect and to leverage their investment in home buying counseling and could prove helpful in our ability to at least get the word out in ways that may not have occurred in the past. But I just want to say thank you. As a former affordable home builder and now as the CEO of a housing authority that has Section 8 vouchers that can be used to assist others in getting into homes. I really appreciate the effort and proud to be a part of supporting, marketing, and celebrating this initiative. Thank you all.
Thank you, Director Williams. Other questions or comments?
I have
Got
one. Oh, that's okay.
Oh, actually, I think I saw your hand earlier, so Director Avila Farias, please go ahead.
Thank you. Can we go back to slide, I think it was 34? That's the only way I'll remember my comments. Was it? No, it was where you had to, what the criteria was of the proposed changes. Yeah, thank you. Overall, great job. As always, I'm always feeling like I'm part of the cool kids club with all this thoughtful dialogue that happens, not only on the board, but behind closed doors with all the staff. So thank you guys for your help on all this thoughtful thinking to better improve the program and roll out a better product. I'm a little bit concerned about the income eligibility, just because, again, we all live in different geographic areas. And, you know, poverty and just barely making it just looks so different now in California of how we defined it even just 20 years ago. So I'm always leery of when we want to go down. Of course, we want to help the most vulnerable, but we also have a poverty issue in the state of California. And I think looking at public policy and programs of what helps people move up what I call the housing economic ladder, to eventually build, you know, generational wealth is really critical, to not just look at it how we have historically looked at it, like let's just get a bunch of home buyers and that's great. I mean, there's the community education, there's how we get people up the economic ladder, and then sustainability. The other, in the sustainability, you know, the Great Recession brought, you know, a lot of first-time home buyers and even existing home buyers to their knees because they got into loan products. I think it's kind of a bummer that we're going to be able to, you know, how we're going is going to exclude them, you know, from taking a bite at the apple again because, you know, for unforeseen circumstances, I mean, the whole, you know, everybody collapsed. They won't be able to apply because by definition, they're not first-time home buyers. But I also feel they were a lot of our first-time home buyers who fell, you know, to victims to the Great Recession. So I think our world is just really different in lending and who people are, and even the income, you know, every day, you know, my husband and I wake up and I'm like, oh, I'm so thankful we bought our home so many years ago. I don't think we could afford our home today. And that's, you know, with what we would say a decent salary. And, you know, a lot of our network, you know, of people making 200,000 are still renters. And that's happening in California. And I think we need to recalibrate that there's something wrong when you can hit middle age and have a good paying job, but still not afford a home in California. And also, again, you know, we can dissect this from so many angles of like, what, they're making 200,000 versus someone who's, you know, like housing authority families that are, you know, below the poverty. And I think it's just being able to go from the helicopter down to the basement of, and many of us who have been products of affordable housing and have gone up that socioeconomic ladder, I think it's really important to look at those case studies of what is the best method to help people go up that ladder, and people who haven't, who have the potential to go up the ladder but haven't been able to execute it. Because I think they're all very vulnerable regardless of income. And then, you know, we'd be remiss not to think about, you know, how do we break the cycle of poverty? Because housing is going to keep going up, but if salaries aren't going up, that's even a bigger problem for us without the subsidies. And I think we need to, you know, have a more dialogue with our community partners that are doing workforce housing and who are in the education and workforce development, because it really, housing really ties together to all of that, you know, we have to figure out, you know, how we are able to take very low income families who have the potential to earn more income to a higher income so that we can take them up that housing ladder. But in the meantime, sustain them in affordable rental, but then move them on. And so I'd like for us to have more of that lens, because I don't feel that everyone should stay in rental housing forever. I mean, some families, you know, some individuals it makes sense for, but I think if we're going to really build generational wealth, we have to look at it from so many different angles. And then our stats of, demographic wise, Latinos are going to be 40%, or if we're not already, the majority here in the not so distant future, but we're at 40%. So it's obvious why who's applying for the loans. It's based on demographics, but also looking at it a different lens of equity of, African Americans, they're probably exiting the state of California and going somewhere else. That maybe we need more programs of how we sustain families here to prevent the migration of out of state. So I think it just needs so many different lenses to so many different layers of problems versus just rolling out traditional loan products. And, that's just a perspective. But I think we're headed in the right track. And I don't know, even number 4 is kind of problematic, in my community, Contra Costa, which is probably not even the most expensive in, California, but a townhouse in Contra Costa is $800,000. And so I think just our perspective of what $800,000 really buys us now is, are we really going to tell people, sorry, your 2-bedroom townhouse is not eligible? So I think these caps, like I said, sometimes do a disservice to what we're really trying to do when we have so many layers and so many community members that we're trying to serve. And I know there's not one, but I don't think we should create the traditional model. We should be thoughtful and creative to try to hit as many segments as possible. That's all I had.
Thank you.
So couple of questions. One is, you mentioned there is a lottery system for people who sign up. Is that right?
Yeah, that's
so. Is there any way that you can prioritize the low AMI through the lottery system to give them more chances to be part of it, or they're like equal?
So I think that's certainly an option. I think that's something that is on the table as we develop the lottery system. The intent would be to narrow the eligibility for the program sort of at the outset. But I do think that there is the opportunity to also, weave in additional ways of sort of weighting eligibility through the registration system.
Highly recommend that. The other questions, is there any limitation on type of homes that the borrowers can purchase?
No, so long as you are eligible for conventional financing, then you can purchase a home.
And have you considered, because of what you showed on the map, to instead of like having $800,000 limit for house, to have a regional caps, like every region have a different caps, so be more equitable based on the housing market?
Yeah, I think that's certainly an option. And I also think that this is, again, where we want to use the pre-registration system to help us maintain that flexibility. So by reserving funds by region, then I think we can look and see what the uptake is in each region. And so if we're seeing a significant problem, Director Abla Frias's comments were really on point about being able to afford a home at under $800,000 or find a home at under $800,000 in certain counties. So if we're seeing that our borrowers simply cannot access homes, or that we're not reaching the targeted income eligibility requirements, I think the registration system helps to give us that flexibility to make calibrations, respond to market conditions, and make adjustments as necessary to make sure that we are serving borrowers across the state.
Thank you.
Director Limon.
Thank you so much. I have a lot to say here. First of all, to Director Williams' point, there are very few programs in the state that address the biggest issue that folks are addressing when it comes to their homeownership journey, which is the low supply of housing, or that entry-level homeownership supply. Aside from CalHome at HCD, there really aren't a lot of programs, which is commend the legislature for passing AB 1033 that's awaiting signature from the governor, because that bill actually might incentivize the production of that entry-level supply for sale. But with all that said, I am receiving calls every day on realtors, especially that are waiting for this program to come out, because it's really it's giving people a beacon of hope as they're facing such high interest rates, as they're facing the affordability crisis, especially for first-time home buyers. So I just want to commend the team and all of the thought that went into thinking about this program in the legislature, on thinking about how to craft the program so the money lasts longer and it really does target the people that it's meant to target. I think there's some really positive changes. I really want to commend also the pre-registration. I think that's going to be tremendous to ensure that the right people are getting the funds, and so that CalHFA can be more intentional. I think that's very, very good investment up front as the program is going to become more institutionalized. And I really appreciate the minimum cumulative loan to value ratio cap. I was very concerned about some of the trends that I was hearing in terms of some of the ways that Dream for All was being advertised on social media as well. And I think that really gets to ensuring that the people that need it most are going to get the funds. So really want to commend you on that. I do want to highlight the goals and objectives and point us both to slide 5, where it lists the goals and objectives, and also that I think is based on the data from slide 17. So I think we have different, one that says goals and objectives. Yeah, right there. Oh, the other one. We were just there. There you goals and objectives. Right there. Thank you. We absolutely, I think anything that we can do to increase the program uptake for the Black and African American community is extremely important. But I also want to, I want to push us in terms of the thinking around the Latino community. And I really want to caution us to thinking that the DFA outperformed within the Latino population. As Director Farias said, Latinos are 40% of the population. Given the fact that their ages, the median age is 30.2, Latinos are entering into prime home buying years. And if you think about the future and the fact that Latinos are that California has the second lowest homeownership rate in the country, and you think about the fact that half of our population under 18 is Latino, then really if we're going to increase the California homeownership rate, we must do much better than just reach proportional representation for the Latino population. So I would ask that we increase program uptake in Black and African American communities, and also increase uptake in the Latino community, given what it means to the overall state, and the ability for us to increase the California homeownership rate. I have a couple of questions as well. First, who is responsible for enforcement in terms of the first generation? So you listed that eligibility established via attestation under penalty of perjury. Who is enforcing it? Is it CalHFA?
I always appreciate what you have to say. The CalHFA would be enforcing the attestation to first generation home ownership, and we would be undergoing a review as part of our compliance review, as well as instituting procedures to do spot checks or audits and so forth related to ensuring that those the veracity of those attestations.
What would be some of the consequences if someone lies, for example?
So as we work through the implementation process, we'll bring those forward likely at the October meeting, but we're working on identifying sort of what the avenues of recourse are and establishing those processes and procedures so that we have the tools in place to make sure that we are serving the people that we intend to serve through the program.
Thank you. And my final question is, I know that a lot of the changes, I mean, folks are waiting on pins and needles for this money to come out, but I know that a lot of the changes that I think for the most part are very positive came from the legislature, but some of it did come from CalHFA. So as you mentioned earlier that we will be revisiting in October. What are some of the efforts or the outreach efforts or listening tours that you're doing to ensure that the individuals that are waiting on pins and needles that experience the Dream for All program on the first go around have input into some of the changes that were made?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So we've already conducted a great amount of outreach. We've heard from a tremendous number of stakeholders since, even before the program closed at early April. So we've been constantly talking to and engaging with various stakeholders. We held a stakeholder and community-based organization listening session several months ago where many folks that were really important stakeholders in the program came, offered their comments just after I think the program closed. So we've received a lot of valuable information already that is in large part reflected in the calibrations that we're bringing forward. And we're going to continue those conversations with very targeted outreach to members of our advisory committee, other stakeholders in the community, activists that we've talked to, in order to make sure that the calibrations that we're bringing forward are in line with and reflective of the feedback that we've heard with regards to how to make these funds more targeted and really to help make a dent in access to homeownership in California.
I'd like to offer, just if there's anything that I can do to help with,
Yes,
with some of that
absolutely.
outreach, please let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. And first of all, thank you, Ms. Martin and your staff for being really ahead of the curve, I think, on this. A lot of the direction that came from, it's nice that we're not in a place where we're trying to navigate between contradictory objectives here. I think that we are all in alignment with the legislature and the discussions we've had here. So thank you for keeping that discussion kind of on beam. And thank you to my colleagues for really asking about half the questions I had on my page, so I can be a little bit briefer. I can't say enough how much I appreciate your thoughtful approach to these are challenging issues. So the thoughtfulness that has gone into this has been spoken to here. I do want to give an amen to Mr. Prince here with the bias toward lower income. At least initially, let's make sure that we're reserving these funds, if we can, for folks who are really most in need. So I'm just going to say amen to Mr.
I usually get the get out of here comment, so you're not appreciated.
Not for me, not for me. I'm a Mr. Prince fan here. I would like to look at next month, and I think Director Williams talked about this, Ms. Limon as well, about where those certified lenders are, because you talk about having primary areas of interest. That doesn't say that they have offices, and so I guess understanding literally where are they located, because physical presence, geography matters tremendously in this kind of outreach. And of course, this is something this entity is familiar with, CalHFA, with our a lot of other programs, including the mortgage relief and other things. But really, and when you come back in October, it'd be great to be able to see literally maybe a pin map of where you have people located. And it speaks to what Ms. Limon's question is about. Can she help? Can I help? Can any of our members help you identify additional partners in the field? The interest rates, this is a question about, we are getting people into homes at interest rates that are I'm old enough to say they're not historically high. I mean, double digits are not unknown to me in my life. I'm that old. But are we getting people into 7, 8, 9% loans? Are they able to refinance readily and keep the benefits of this program? If at such a time as rates come back down and it's advantageous, is that readily available to folks?
We will allow one resubordination under a defined set of circumstances over the life of the loan, with the express intent of making sure that folks can refinance, because we know that they're coming into this market at, too many people, historical interest rate highs. And so we do want to make sure that we are maintaining the wealth building and wealth creating aspects of the program by allowing those same home buyers to benefit from lower interest rates if we do see them settle around a more sustainable level.
Very good, thank you, thank you. And how does our support play with other support programs? Do these, can you layer different kinds of assistance? And okay, so
yes, so absolutely. You can layer different kinds of assistance. We also, that's sort of how we design the CLTV threshold was we do want to be able to include other community seconds in the program. And the housing vouchers are actually a top item on my list to explore and identify how programs like that could be integrated with the Dream for All Shared Appreciation Loan and also our other down payment assistance programs.
Wonderful, thank you. And then just a general comment about people staying in rental housing versus being able to own. I don't want to offer up or suggest that home ownership is an end-all be-all, because in fact, for a lot of households, rentership, if it's stable, is actually a preferred outcome, but we have to provide these options. And so I just want to make sure that, from my personal perspective, some folks just want to be able to live where they live, and if they can get a decent rent, they can save money and use it their own ways. Home ownership is not the route to all wealth for all people. This program, however, is providing that option to folks. We need to make it as robust as possible, and I appreciate the work that has gone into doing this. So thank you.
I was going to be quiet, but I think that opens the door again to this retreat that we need to be doing, because again, you look at in Vienna, where 70% of all housing is social housing, half of that owned by the housing authority, half owned by limited profit entities, and they have no one who's homeless. They had 17 evictions in the year prior to COVID, right? When there's an investment in ownership of housing, social housing and publicly owned housing, then what you can have is wealth creation that comes from pensions and from healthcare, right? And what I think we do is we kind of say, I'm so happy for those 2,000 families. That's a small drop in the bucket of those who need assistance. And what we're saying is equity means that a few people of color become homeowners and get to participate in the commodification of housing that has been harmful to so many others in this state. I mean, I think that we have to step back and ask the question: what caused this housing crisis? What has caused homelessness? And are we creating a system? Are we supporting a system that isn't necessarily solving the bigger problem? Right? All of a sudden, we have a few more homeowners who then perpetuate the NIMBY kind of approach that happens in so many communities because they have their house and they feel like anything that's happening is going to harm their wealth at the expense of other people in the community. I just feel like there's a philosophical conversation that we should be having about what are the right things. I think all of this is, I agree, is addressing the transaction and is making inroads, but I do think that there's a broader conversation. I'm nearing the end of my career, and I feel like it's just like I'm getting there, and I just feel like it's time to really change the system. We have just too many people who are homeless. We have too many people who are fragile and vulnerable, and we're not changing the big systems to really make housing for all, right? It's not, in my mind, getting us there. I feel like I wasted 30 years because it's like problems haven't been solved, and so to me, it's time to get there. Don't shake your head at me, Secretary.
And very impactful. But I do think, if I can
Please
speak.
I hope you give a little bit more cogent.
Well, no, I had a question about, is there potential to bring in philanthropy to match what the state has contributed towards this program? So $255 million, we know this program works. This is also, as we have all said, about wealth creation, and in this very difficult housing market, right? Providing the level of financial support, but also there's counseling, there's a whole sort of system here of helping families be more economically stable and climb the economic ladder. And so I'm just, I think it would be helpful for us to pursue conversations with funders about matching what the state is contributing, because $255 million, great, thank you legislature, thank you Treasurer Mott, thank you to the governor, but it's 2,000 households. And so if there's a way to be able to double those dollars that are dedicated, I don't know enough about the parameters of the program to on whether or not there are any restrictions with pulling in additional dollars to dedicate, to grow the pot, basically.
I think that's an extraordinarily creative idea and absolutely something that we should be looking into. And I think perhaps is something that we can evaluate as part of the program financing options study is to think about what are some of the really creative and innovative partnerships out there that might help us to leverage the state's investment and do more. I think one thing I like to think about housing as an economic development tool, as well as, a basic human right. And I think one of the things that we need to look at are ways that we can partner with all sectors of the economy and of California in order to help improve access to homeownership. And so I love that idea.
Director Zimwan and then Director White.
I wanted to piggyback on what the secretary said. I think in terms of this program, the California Dream for All, it's supposed to be self-sustaining because, eventually people will sell their homes and will pay the money back. Can we have some sort of, in future meetings, can we have some sort of analysis on when we think that might be the case, that some money might be added back into the pot aside from the gubernatorial allocation?
Yes, and if I may expand, so the very excellent work that was conducted by California Forward under the guidance and leadership of the State Treasurer's Office looked at the sort of the long-term viability and sustainability of the Dream for All Fund. And that analysis did assume $1 billion in capital investment for 10 years, at which time they anticipated that the funding would then become sort of self-sustaining and recyclable. That same study estimated that the life of a shared appreciation loan is approximately 16 years. So if you're thinking about the investments that we've made to date and the investments that we'll make in the next coming years, because under a shared appreciation loan, there is more incentive for folks to hang on to their home. We don't expect to see sort of the typical 7-year duration, although interest rates may influence that. But we would expect to see these homes, these mortgages last about 16 years before we start seeing really substantial turnover in the market.
The study that will come, that you guys will be working on to see if there are some more innovative ways that we can kind of put more money into that fund or invest it somehow or gather from various different sources so that it's not this 11-day fund.
We would all like that.
15 years, I think Director Prince will still be here to help us with this.
Yeah, no question, just I'll try to make my comments brief, but I want to commend the staff on reimagining the scope of DFA. This is very difficult work, and what you are approaching are structural challenges that we have in this system from the state and obviously nationwide. So, and it's not easy to do any of that. And just based on the spirit of my colleagues here on their various comments, it's very obvious that there's a challenge in terms of addressing the structural challenges we have with home ownership and poverty. So kudos, appreciate it. Secretary Castro mentioned innovation around matching these funds. That's just a model I think CalHFA has, since I've been on the board, has embraced. And so we can do it with home ownership, we can do it with rental. But I think we should keep the spirit of innovating around what we do and how we can bring in the private sector. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Director White. Any other comments, questions from the board before I go to the public?
I'd like to make
one other one. Yes.
Okay, I hope my microphone's on so you can hear me. Hello. Thank you so much for the report. This is really fascinating to see where you're able to kind of change some of our requirements and targets for this program. I'd like us all to consider the importance of, since we're talking about first-time, individuals who are young families who may have children. And oftentimes when we make decisions about where we're going to live, we know that the expectation of education and how we're going to give our children access to adequate education often comes into play. And for people that are able to select where they want to live, they often look at the schools that their children are going to go to. And of course, we know that, historically, this has led to the creation of different neighborhoods overlaid with racial, inequities and racism. I think it's important for us to start talking about bringing in some of our educational partners and how school policies and school choice and a lack of investment in our public school institutions directly impacts where people may be buying homes. And that, of course, shapes our communities, it depresses home value, and it also impacts people who may be looking to buy homes for the first time and build generational wealth. We see this in open school enrollment. When people have a choice about where to send their kids, they're going to send their kids to the wealthier schools. They're going to send their kids to schools that may not be racially as diverse and mixed. And those schools, unfortunately, are higher schools with more Black and brown children continue to be the schools that are underfunded and under-enrolled and eventually closed. And that, of course, impacts our neighborhoods. So if we can start bringing in our educational partners to some of these conversations and figure out how neighborhoods and communities are really shaped through homeownership, especially this homeownership for first-time home buyers, I think it helps us create the communities that we want to see and give people more access to quality homeownership, safer neighborhoods, and of course, better educational institutions for their children. So I'd love to help you with that conversation at some point. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. I think I've got.
I'd just like to put on the list of things to consider. We're trying to address the problem on the back end, that we can begin to think about what can we do to inspire single-family home construction at the same time that we are providing opportunity for purchasing homes. Because if we just are always responding to the market conditions that are completely out of our control or influence as it relates to availability or even price, we'll always just be responding. But I think given where we are and the long-term vision of the housing crisis in our state, at some point, either through us or some other financing vehicle, to look at what can we do to incentivize not only home ownership, but affordable home construction and that may be out of our purview. I don't know, we can't solve all of the problems of the world here at this dais, but I do think it's a serious enough element of the home ownership continuum that it warrants some consideration and discussion about what can we do to incentivize. The United States government has been, that's what happened after World War II. All of these suburbs were incentivized by.
Thank you, Director Williams. Any other last comments?
Just a real brief one, and it really picks on Ms. Malone's comments about the Latino community. I'd be remiss if we didn't start to look at some of the ways that we break down these program uptakes into different groups. Latino takes on a lot of different shades of what a Latino is. When I particularly look at the Asian Pacific Islander grouping, you take on lots of different shades of who people are in different communities within our state. And I don't think that those traditional definitions really reflect our state and some of the communities we're trying to approach.
Thank you.
First and foremost, I want to thank, I knew that y'all were going to be engaged. I didn't know you were going to be this engaged, and I am delighted to hear your voices on this. This is exactly what the staff needed and continues to need in order to inform the program. So thank you. Thank you for really owning this and sharing your view. And all of them will be taken into consideration, and many of them I got to tell you, we have had nights, and I've here, these two right here, just going back and forth. How does this work? How does this work? How can we do this better and differently? Everything that you're giving to us is giving us life, is giving us the ability to make this program the best that it could be. So I wanted to first and foremost thank you. A couple of notes that I do think that the staff will absolutely be following up on. I love the idea of leveraging. Right on. That is my middle name, is leveraging. We've done a very successful job of doing that on the multifamily rental side. Home ownership, we're there. You have been heard. And we are going to be looking at that. And it's not just looking at it, one way, one vision of how we leverage that in terms of bringing them in for their benefit of possibly CRA, but for the benefit of doing business with CalHFA. How about that? We're looking at it all ways. If you are in relationship with us, we expect you to be in relationship with us. That's my motto. So we will be taking that on seriously, and all of the things that were said today. I just wanted to highlight that as, I think, where we need to be innovative. That's where the innovative comes in, is looking at things not just in the ways that we have traditionally looked at them, demographics, geography, but also looking at how we can expand it. I'm hearing also Directors Williams about the supply. If we're not talking about supply, then what are we talking about? Not only is that 50% of the challenge that we have already self-identified as one of the primary challenges of delivery of homeownership in the state of California, it is absolutely an area where there are very, very limited answers. So we recognize that and understand that, and don't know what our role will look like in that, but the way that we are approaching it is not just standing in just what we're looking at, but also connecting with Director Velasquez, collecting with other areas within the state of California to see how we can, if nothing else, influence how that conversation goes. But that's where we're starting with that. We are taking that really quite seriously, and I'm really, really grateful for you to bring that up. So with that, I know we have questions from the public we'd like to.
I have a comment or question.
Okay.
So first of all, I do want to thank staff for the work on this. It's really impressive how you've already taken feedback from stakeholders and made modifications in this phase 2 relative to phase 1. So a clear shout out to staff in this regard. I also don't want to leave unrecognized Treasurer Ma for getting the ball rolling on all this. And we're here talking about this because of some insight and creative thinking, but with one of our partners, if you will. So I wanted to sort of note that as well. I think that there's some, this is a really robust discussion, set of questions here, and board members have identified a number of the things I wanted to touch on. I will note a couple of things. One, like Director Russell, I do remember double-digit interest rates with FHA loans going up north of 7% now. I think that contingency of allowing for a refinance down the line where we subordinate kind of makes sense. It does potentially push off the timeline when we get the funds back. There's a trade-off. But I think we just need to be cognizant of where the market's at. The other thing, and I like the flexibility of the voucher system where we can maybe recalibrate as we go along. My hunch is this, once this program launches, it'll be sort of like Beyonce tickets. It'll be oversubscribed. And I think it's important for us to be clear with people who have put in for it, that if there are modifications that we make to provide for flexibility, that it's clear to them what they're getting. I don't want to set up a case of false expectations. I think we just need to be really careful how we manage the perception of the individuals who put it together with their lender to get it into this program. I don't want to break faith with them. I want to be clear with them that they're not necessarily guaranteed a spot, but and also maybe what some of those parameters are. I just think that's really important for our credibility. And with that, I imagine there may well be some public comments. I'd like to ask Melissa to please solicit if there's any members of the public who have comments or questions. And just given the time here where we're targeting a 1 o'clock end of this meeting and it's noon, I'd like to see if we could hold the public comments to 2 minutes each, if that's possible. So if you could, Melissa, please open the floor.
So at this time, we'll be taking comment from those participating through Zoom. If you're on Zoom and would like to make a public comment, please raise your hand and we'll call upon you. And I think too, we'll keep this session to 10 minutes or less at this time. So to Courtney to see if we have members ready. Okay, so it looks like actually we do not have any hands raised at this time.
Staff for the presentations and the board for a very thorough and wide-ranging discussion. So thank you both very much. And with that, we will move on to agenda item 6, multifamily year-end production presentation with Kate Ferguson, Director of Multifamily Programs.
Can you all hear me? Oh, there it's on. Okay. Good morning, Chair Cervantes and members of the board. For the record, I am Kate Ferguson. I'm the Director of Multifamily Programs at CalHFA. In your board packets this month, you received quarterly multifamily production report as of fiscal year end 6/30/23. And today I will give you a brief overview of our numbers along with some historic context related to the drivers of our production. Next slide. So in fiscal year 22-23, the multifamily division achieved a record 1.9 billion in total production. Volume came from a combination of new commitments for loans to be funded over the next 3 to 4 years, closings related to loan commitments made in previous periods, along with our conduit bond issuances related to closings of construction loans made by a variety of construction lenders. Our goal over the past 5 years has been to grow overall production volume to ensure growth of fee revenue in the short term and long-term interest annuity. We have accomplished this goal by pursuing continuous improvements to the program offerings, which you can see reflected on this slide. Specifically, we have leveraged our mixed income program, known as MIP, to be a primary driver of production. As resources allocated to MIP increased in the form of an annual allocation of $200 million in state tax credits from TCAC and a set aside of new bond cap at SIDLA, leveraged the subsidy program by requiring MIP be paired with CalHFA's conduit issuer and permanent loan program. We've ensured that every MIP subsidy loan drives growth of our other programs as well, and of our revenue and balance sheet. The growth reflected on this slide is indicative of that strategy. This slide shows you the impact of each of our programs on production. In blue, you'll see the largest proportionate shares consistently from activity in our conduit issuer program. We continue to improve this program's pricing and structure to gain additional market share. In the last fiscal year, more than 50% of our conduit business was also tied to MIP deals. Second to conduit, you can see is our permanent loan production, all of which was tied to MIP in 22-23. And third in yellow is volume resulting from actual MIP permanent loan closings, which were committed in prior periods 2 to 4 years ago. Finally, in orange is our actual MIP subsidy loan production, which is only 5% of the overall number. While the actual MIP funding is the smallest proportionate share of production, it is the driver of the bulk of our activities. MIP subsidy and its related resources at SIDLAC and TCAC are not available unless it's paired with CalHFA's permanent and conduit programs. In this way, we've leveraged a smaller subsidy program to build CalHFA production and grow our revenue and balance sheet. Next slide. This slide shows you the impact of our 50% of units produced in the last fiscal year resulted from the leveraging of our MIP program. Additional growth has been the result of improvements and increased market share in our standalone conduit business. Next slide, please. And this slide reflects some summary metrics related to fiscal year 22-23, and again highlights the impact of MIP on each program. Notably, all of our permanent loan commitments in the fiscal year were commitments on MIP deals. Next slide, please. The reason I'm sharing our historic results with a focus on the relationship between production growth and MIP is to lay out our expected framework for the achievement of our future goals. Looking at the business plan goals approved by the board for the current 20 line already includes new MIP perm loan commitments which exceed business plan goals, and conduit unit production to date exceeds 40% of goal. Conduit end unit production to date exceeds 40% of goal, and we're only 25% of the way through the fiscal year. All of the MIP activity to date is related to the 2023 MIP term sheet, which was released in March of this calendar year. Next slide. So we've proven the important relationship between the MIP and the mixed income program and our production growth over the past 5 years. I fully expect our production trajectory in the next few years will continue to be fueled in much the same way. And because of that, we at CalHFA and remain focused on maintaining the efficacy of MIP as a primary driver of portfolio and revenue growth. We continue to focus on and test the characteristics of MIP which have made it successful. Consistency in these primary tenets of the program is important in a market that has been full of turmoil. That said, we also recognize the need to ensure we are meeting ever-changing market needs along with the priorities of the administration. As such, in the next 2 months, CalHFA will conduct its annual review of the program. In partnership with our stakeholders, our partners at the State Treasurer's Office, and our administration colleagues, we will assess the need for any changes or improvements to the 2024 program term sheet. This term sheet will be published in the first calendar quarter of next year, and I anticipate I'll share a snapshot of any changes with you at the November board meeting. Additionally, I wanted to give you a snapshot of what you'll see at the November and January board meetings in terms of related deals to this year's MIP. We expect to be bringing 12 new 2023 MIP projects, including up to $275 million in new MIP permanent loan commitments and approximately $42 million in MIP subsidy loan commitments. These will be funded approximately 36 months from the time of final approval. And with that, that ends the summary, and I'd be happy to take any questions or comments.
Yes, thank you.
First of all, Ms. Ferguson, I want to thank you. I think my term on this board has been concurrent with the origination and growth of this particular program. So we've seen it evolve quite a bit and how we have been able to accommodate needs in the marketplace to make it better. I guess my question would be, you're talking about a review that would lead up to the new 2024 term sheet. To what extent do you reach out to the customer base for that input?
We do a fairly extensive stakeholder outreach. This year will be at minimum. We've developed a survey that'll be going out very shortly to everyone who has applied for the MIP program since 2019. So that is a large swath of the development community in the state. And we'll be asking for feedback, especially in the context of the existing market and challenges that people are seeing.
Will you be going out to markets personally or with your team?
To the extent that we can. We generally do this in a 2-month period. And during that period, we are also very heavily involved in underwriting the 2023 MIP deals to bring them to the board in November and January. So to the extent that we can, we will, but honestly, that's the reason we do a survey, because by the timing of this compared to what our workflow is a little bit awkward for us to get the whole staff out.
Understood. The developers that I'm aware of, the a conversation, 45 minutes on a Zoom with a group of people could lead to a lot of information just to augment your survey. I leave it to you to determine the methods, but I just really appreciate any efforts you make to reach out to the.
And I want to
customer
assure
community.
you that we are having constant conversation with the development industry, as well as the investor, the banking industry, and localities. We've done quite a bit of outreach and conversation with localities. And I think as this program continues to mature, there will be more and more of that. But yeah, well, that, I want to assure you that goes on a consistent basis.
Okay. Well, I'll just finish by saying I do admire what you've done with this program over the years, and thank you for the work and the sensitivity you're showing to making it a really successful program.
Thank you very much.
So if you took MIP out of the picture, that basically cuts multifamily in half. Is that one way of looking at this?
Effectively, half of our unit production is the result of MIP. And our permanent loan program that we pair with MIP is driven entirely by MIP. We, because the funding for MIP directs that it is to go with 4% tax credits and tax exempt bonds. Yes, this is the driver of the bulk of our ongoing production. Our second, you'll see in one of the slides I showed you that the bulk of our activity comes through our conduit issuance program. That program is also paired with MIP, which accounts for about 50% of the activity. The other 50, we're constantly trying to build our market share in that program. It has very skinny margins, but is a very low risk program for Cal HFA, and one where it gives us an opportunity to really work with the localities. So yes, I would say that MIP, in terms of our revenue production and our balance sheet, growth in the balance sheet over the past 5 years, has been largely the result of MIP, which is why the efficacy in maintaining the program right now, it's one of our greatest resources.
Thank you. I'd like to see if there's any, Melissa, see if there are any public comments or questions. Again, Melissa, if you could go out to the Zoom platform, I'd like the public to keep their comments at 2 minutes, and probably an aggregate of 10 minutes. So let's see.
So we'll open up the Zoom platform for public comment at this time. If you have a comment, please raise your hand and we will call upon you. We're not seeing any hands raised at this time.
Thank you very much. Ms. Ferguson, thank you so much. So we'll move on to our item 7 on the agenda, which is the multifamily financing strategy post-revenue bond sale report with our Director of Financing, Erwin Tam. We have a guest, Jeff Frew, Morgan Stanley. Thank you so much for joining us. And Erwin, please take it away.
Thank you, Chair Cervantes. Good afternoon, members of the board. I think this is a moment you've all been waiting for, a discussion about bonds. I'm Erwin Tam, Director of Financing here at Cal HFA. As part of the board-approved investment and debt management policy, the board receives a post-sale report after the issuance of revenue bonds. As this is the first issuance of bonds under this new policy and a new indenture, this item is being presented rather than being filed as an informational report to the board. This is a two-part presentation. I will provide information on the financing strategy for the agency for its multi-loan commitments, and Jeff, Managing Director at Morgan Stanley, will present the post-sale report. Morgan Stanley was the book-running senior manager for the bonds. If we could start the presentation. Oh, sorry, that was already the first slide. If you go to next slide, please. I wanted to start with the background on board actions related to multifamily lending activities. Every March, the board is presented for consideration a group of 5 resolutions collectively referred to as the annual financing resolutions. 3 of these 5 resolutions authorize the executive director and others to execute various steps involved with multifamily lending. The board actions on this slide are ordered chronologically for a typical multifamily financing. I'm going to walk through the applicable resolutions. After the application process, MIP scoring, and initial commitment process through the agency's senior loan committee, the top developments are submitted to CIDLAC for volume cap allocations. The annual financing resolution, as approved by the board of directors, authorizes the agency to submit these applications. Assuming a successful allocation, the developments go through a final commitment process through the agency's senior loan committee. Any permanent loans under $15 million are forwarded to the executive director for approval. Permanent loans over $15 million are approved by the executive director and are also submitted to the board for additional approval. A question was asked at a prior board meeting what the breakdown of approvals between the executive director only and the executive director and board jointly. Since 2020, 85% of the total volume of permanent loans are approved by this board. If approved, the development closes construction thereafter and goes to construction closing. Multifamily construction is typically run over the 36 months in the current economic environment. When development is completed and meets the terms and conditions set by CalHFA, development converts to permanent financing. The board approves the multifamily non-bond resolution to allow the agency to fund permanent financing through its line of credit or balance sheet and to fund the subordinate MIP loan. From time to time, the line of credit will be refinanced out through the issuance of bonds. The board approves the multifamily bond resolution to allow the agency to fund permanent financing through the issuance of bonds. As you recall, there was an additional approval this past March, which approved the form of indenture for the new affordable housing revenue bonds. Lastly, on this slide, the board adopted a investment and debt management policy, which requires this post-sale report. On the next page, it's the illustrative timing of multifamily lending. As Kate mentioned, the board is expected to consider approvals of permanent loans related to MIP 2023 in November 2023 and January 2024. There are many steps and approvals prior to the board's consideration of permanent financing and many actions taken thereafter. For example, the MIP applications that Kate mentioned were due in March 2023, went through an initial commitment process through the agency's senior loan committee, and received approval by the executive director in May. MIP 2023 projects were submitted to TCAC and CIDLAC later that month and received allocation in late August. The board will only see resolutions approving MIP 23 projects upon approval of the executive director through the agency's senior loan committee process. Assuming approval, the projects move to close construction. The agency guarantees a fixed rate to this project at this time. 36 months or later, or sometimes more, the agency's financial commitment occurs to the funding of permanent first lien and subordinate MIP loans. The financial risk from guaranteeing a rate years in advance for funding is one of the risks that CalHFA takes as a multifamily lender. We'll talk about this more at an upcoming meeting. After all of this, we finally get to the issuance of bonds. Next slide, please. So why did we start a new indenture and restart our bond program? And why haven't we really issued parity bonds since 2014? From 2014, the agency typically borrowed from the Federal Financing Bank, or FFB, to fund multifamily production. But circumstances are different in the current market. First, the availability of FFB as a financing tool was ended in 2019 and restarted in 2021. So permanent loans are eligible for FFB at commitment, not at the time of funding. So if you remember the timeline on the prior slide, we fund 36 or more months after the commitment. So the loans we are currently funding were approved by this board and committed to in 2019 and 2020. The other thing that has changed is the outstanding amount of multifamily commitments. Kate just presented to you the results of the efforts of the Multifamily Programs Division. To put it another way, in 2019, the agency had approximately $200 million of commitments to fund over the next 4 years. As of today, the agency is committed to $1.02 billion in multifamily lending over the next 4 years. So on the last slide here, how are we going to fund $1 billion of commitments? We're going to use a strategy of best execution for CalHFA between bonds, FFB, and CalHFA capital reserves. In creating a new bond program, we set up some objectives in addition to just funding these permanent loans. First, the prior indenture pledged the agency's general fund as a backstop. This indenture removes it. Second, we wanted to highlight the environmental and social aspects of the funded developments through additional disclosure and the sustainability designation. Third, This was a once-in-a-lifetime chance for us to create a new indenture alongside a new single-family indenture. And so we sought to be aligned with both of these new indentures. And lastly, we wanted to achieve a broad investor base to support future bond issuances. That ends my portion of the presentation. I'll take any of the questions that the board may have, and I'll turn it over to Jeff to discuss the details of the bond issuance and the results of our successful initial debt offering.
I do have one. Oh,
Could we go back to just that last slide? What are the positive implications of us no longer removing the CalFHA general fund as a backstop?
Right.
What are the implications for our agency and our financial position?
Correct. That's a great question. You know, I think since I started here, one of the things I've tried to do was sort of wall off our actual general fund from additional obligations. That included, you know, again, redeeming all of the multifamily bonds underneath the old indenture, and in making sure that we're not overtaxing our own sort of core assets, our capital reserves, to existing for future. Committing them, you know, just in case. We have structured the new indenture in such a manner that it would achieve a rating equal to the agency's overall credit rating. So the bonds are rated AA, AA2, AA. Our general fund or issuer rating is also the same rating, but there's no pledge in between. They're separate and apart, and we were able to achieve that again through the structuring of the bonds. And so I think that just was just to try to again wall off the agency's commitments to make sure that our core business lines are protected and the agency's bonds stand alone by themselves.
I think that was a great move. Anything that can ensure our long-term financial viability, given the fluidity of state funding and the economy itself, I commend you. And to be able to maintain an incredibly high rating, and at the same time, we're creating those walls and protecting our finance. I know that that's one of the goals of the agency here, is to make sure that we are being fiscally responsible regarding the funding to maintain the agency. And I commend you all on being able to do that and still maintain an incredibly high bond rating at the same time. Thank you all for your efforts. I just wanted to clarify and then acknowledge that incredible accomplishment.
Great. Sorry.
That was the mic drop moment that I wanted to underline, and so you nailed it. And now we're going to talk about the going forward strategy, which will be led by Jeff Prue. Yeah. But the other mic drop moment that I don't want us to miss is that we have gone from 200 million now to over $1 billion. And so how do we then, what's the go forward motion for ensuring that we have the funds to backstop all of those commitments? And so,
yeah. And I would just, my one comment too, actually, one is that it's just that point, which is it's a yay boo in a way. Your slide 5, which is maybe page 59, that the amount of production has gone up dramatically with respect to multifamily. It's frankly a bit of a gulp to see that it's over $1 billion, where we've got to sort of manage that. So great opportunity. It's great. We're doing a lot to help further the cause of housing in California, but we just need to manage that. And the slide preceding it, I think, is really helpful because it gives you a sense of what that risk factor is with respect to when we commit and when we fund. There's a long hang time. And I know that that's something that Erwin, you and your staff have been working on to sort of mitigate that risk. But that's something for us to bear in mind as well. I don't think there's any other comments from members of the board. I'm going to hold off on public comments so we're done with this agenda item and turn this now to our representative from Morgan Stanley, Jeff Prue. Thank you for joining us.
No, absolutely. And it's an absolute pleasure to be here this afternoon to talk about the bond sale, particularly because I'm here to report on resounding success. It's always good to come in and be able to present highlights about all of the choices that were made and how the market responded to those choices. And it responded again, resoundingly in a successful way. So really happy about that and happy to be here today. So thank you. Turning to the first slide, I've got a number of slides here to go through, and I think everybody has probably looked at this in the deck. I'm not going to go into a detail on this. I really want to point out the high points on each of the slides, but wanted to give a comprehensive view on what has been worked through really on a long process. We've been working on this transaction over the course of a year, together in concert with an excellent legal team and the full focus of staff to bring forward what is the best technology to move forward in the market. And to Chair Cervantes, your comment about management, this is designed to manage the flow of the production going forward, to leverage the resources that are going into the multifamily program and really create the opportunity to have annuity income over time, build up that balance sheet so we can be in a position to have funds within the indenture that can be plowed back into affordable housing. It's a win-win for the whole program. And at Morgan Stanley, we really applaud what is being done here, because it's also being done in the context of best practices across the industry. We're now in a position to be focused in and create the opportunities going forward that are similar to what the marquee HFAs are doing in other places in the country. So all great. Pointing to the first slide, the things that are highlighted here is that one of the chief goals was to create flexibility in what we are offering. Flexibility and creating that full flexible mode is something of a balance with the market, because you can't do everything, but you need to describe it to the market and tell the market what it is that we can do over time. That comes within the construct of the legal document that we created, the trust indenture that the bonds will live in and the mortgages will live in over time. Again, this is designed not to be a one-off, it's designed to be a major program. I'll give you an example which is one that we looked at and used as we were creating the program, and that's with the state program in New York. New York created a brand new indenture back in 2007, very modest initial deal of $18 million. Today, their portfolio has approaching $7 billion in mortgages under that portfolio. $7 billion of mortgages, and the annuity income coming off of that is substantially levering all of the state dollars that have gone into that program over time. That's not a long period of time to grow like that. We see something very similar here, and we're very happy to be in this with you working on it. The other important points here on this slide is really focusing in on the high rating, as Director Williams was pointing out, AA2 AA. This was a very specific goal that we had in mind. And as part of the process of creating this, I just want to point out the very deliberate way that staff went into getting this rating. We chose to approach both rating agencies with an evaluation process where we presented to them scenarios of what we were looking to do, thinking about maximizing flexibility, because the agency has, as part of its program, insured loans and uninsured loans, loans that go out to term and balloon loans. Those are factors that the rating agencies look at when they're considering their ratings, and we provided them with a range to think about. They appreciated what we were doing, and they also appreciate the program generally speaking too. When we got the rating reports back, one of the highlights was about governance, right? And governance at the board level and the staff level. So getting those ratings and achieving the AA2 AA allows you to access the market at some of the best rates that you can get. It gives the investors the assurance that what they're getting in what they're buying in the bonds is aligned with the buckets that they need. If we were to go for a higher rating, that would mean that we would have to put more resources into the lien and tie that up. We didn't view that as being necessary, and as you'll see with the results of the sale, it absolutely wasn't, and we hit the sweet spot. It will be very important, of course, to maintain those ratings over time. We also designed these ratings, and I think that one of the things that Irwin has reported on recently is the rating upgrade that you received. We will be looking to get upgrades over time, and we would expect that those will happen as a natural consequence of putting more performing loans in the book. That will be something to look forward to over time. When thinking about a new indenture, you can't just take a set of mortgage loans and put them in and sell bonds. You need to have seed funding to over-collateralize that first initial bond issuance. What we chose to do here is to over-collateralize it at a level of $26 million. That's not money that's spent, that's money that lives within the program, and that will allow for future leverage over time. So a really good investment here. And on market receptivity, I think that there was a little bit of concern because the agency had been out of the market for a long period of time as to, how the market would respond and whether it would be something that would be very welcome and the results would be good. Down at the bottom of this slide, we attracted 411 million of orders. I would say that that's pretty good when we're offering 85 million of bonds. As a result of that too, through our lead underwriter, we were able to work with and finesse the pricing over time such that we were able to lower rates, and we did that substantially, and we'll get into that in some detail on the following pages. Flipping to the next slide, this just represents the overall structure, 85 million, and the costs that went into the overall financing. These are market costs, nothing to really think about here. It's pretty standard what was done. The rates that were achieved down the right-hand side of the page, one of the points about this overall financing is that it was challenged by the mortgage rate and the mortgage rate across the 6 loans that were being financed at a 4.13. That's a very low level in the current market. So what we did is we looked to design a structure that would solve to that. That's what you see on the right-hand side of the page. You see a lot of bonds on the front in the serials. We did this for 2 reasons. We did it so that we would lower the overall interest cost, but we also knew that the California market in that serial range for retail investors would respond in force, and they did. Turning to the next slide, the borrower loans that were financed here, this is important to focus in on, and it harkens back to my commentary earlier on loan terms and what we're looking to finance over time and having flexibility over time to include different types of loans in the indenture. 6 loans, we had balloons for 4 of them. You can see that in the middle of the page. That's the 17 years versus 35, 17 versus 40. That means that you had an amortization that's long dated, but a balloon basically after the tax credit compliance period. Sliding over to the right-hand side of the page, the other part of what we're financing here that's very important is the insurance profile. If you have a 100% FHA insured bond indenture, you're going to be able to achieve a very high rating. We wanted to be able to have a mix. And so that was that whole back and forth with the rating agencies. So you see here that we had 3 loans that were FHA insured and 3 loans that weren't. We expect in the future that a large amount of the loans are going to be FHA insured, but don't want to give up the flexibility to do uninsured. The next 2 columns, the subsidy program, again, one of the chief goals of doing this from day one is leverage. We want to leverage off MIP. Kate was talking about the importance of the MIP program. We want to ensure that we have the bond program that is best suited to match to that, and that's what we did here. The other part of this is that all of these transactions, LIHTC, of course, that's the workhorse of what we do. I think that there's a lot of good stuff that's coming up, and we're super excited that you have a focus on middle income, which we think there's a lot going on in that marketplace and a lot of opportunities. Next 2 slides, really, I'm not going to get into detail on these, but this slide, what is the overall setup of the indenture. I will say that we spent a lot of time considering every single line item that you see here, really as a team to evaluate whether we should make changes or not. First and foremost was that whole part that Erwin was talking about on the general obligation. That was then, this is now. A GO pledge is absolutely not necessary to sell these bonds and get these bonds sold at good rates. So we were very, very pleased to dispense with that obligation on the overall indenture. You can see that there were a lot of different things that were considered here. I'm not going to go through these in detail. If people have interest in talking about it later, I'm happy to do that, but don't need to spend time on that now. Next slide. Again, this is about the architecture that was created. This was a matter of taking all of the largest multifamily indentures in the country, filtering through the best and the least effective. One of the things that we are able to do going forward is to really maximize resources that live within the indenture, and particularly the Special Reserve Fund. Very meaningful and will be very important to allow for the best execution to bring in loans that are at or below market. Moving to the next slide, and this is how we presented the transaction to the market. You see on the left-hand side of the page, the front cover of the official statement. The official statement is what is the overall offering document that goes out to the market. A highlight here for you is that we did this in the form of a term sheet, and you can see that a lot of the legal documents have a lot of legal mumbo jumbo on the front. We wanted to set this up and market it such that people could look at the things and look at it in a term sheet format. Right-hand side of the page, overall structure, and you see in green, sustainability bonds. This was a key feature and a key goal of what we were looking to accomplish here. At Morgan Stanley, working on ESG and highlighting impact and the mission of the agencies that we work with is incredibly important. We've been doing this and we've been leading the market for HFAs in terms of ESG starting back in 2014 and 2015. We took all of those best practices and we wrapped it into what we put forward to the market. So that's a real highlight and we're very pleased with the success there. Turning to the next slide, this just represents what was sold to the market. Primarily, we had serial bonds, a small term bond, and a put bond. The put bond was used to maximize optionality for the agency and also to reduce interest rates. I won't go over detail on that. If there are questions, please let me know. Flipping to the next couple of slides, this is the section where we're talking about what we did for ESG. Basically, when I say ESG, I mean marketing the mission of the agency and really putting forward all of the excellent work that's being done now and what we're expecting to do. What we did and what the overall design was is we did a sustainability framework. This was done for the purpose, and I think you all have that as a handout. This was done in this format and as an appendix and as a document that can live by itself, basically as an impact framework and a marketing tool that can be used for whatever purposes. So it doesn't necessarily need to be part of the legal document itself, but we can say to all of our constituents based upon what we did here, all of the highlights of what Cal HFA is doing. That's what we intended to do here. And that's what this document is intended to do over time. This is how all of the best HFAs are using their ESG designations to market the overall product, not just to those who are buying bonds, but to all of the constituents, the localities, people who are making decisions at the local level too. We want to be able to say that we're doing great stuff. And Standard & Poor's verified the point of view that we put forward in the framework. And this is another attachment that I handed around. They said that all of our work here is either advanced or strong. Really, really great results. The overall, for folks that don't understand how the ESG framework works in the bond market, it's aligned to a four-pronged analysis. It's use of proceeds. It's how we have selected the projects that we're funding. It's the management of the proceeds, and then there's a reporting component. One important aspect of this is because this is essentially a reimbursement program and it's not new construction funding. All of the loans were closed when we sold the deal. So there really aren't any ongoing reporting requirements because everybody knows what has been funded. The UN sustainability goals, this is the next slide. The UN came out with sustainability goals that outline the various things that need to happen in the overall economy to make sure that we have a sustainable world going forward. We hit 3 of them: no poverty, affordable and clean energy, and sustainable cities. The affordable and clean energy aspect of this is based upon the information that is included for the individual projects. That's on the next slide. And you can see it with the baseline of all of the projects being subject to the California Title 24 code, and then all of the overlays on top of that, particularly those that come from the projects that are financed in San Francisco. What we highlighted for the impact and for ESG is the area median income that's being served by these developments. That's shown in the chart on the middle part. Obviously, getting to really great levels of affordability, lining up over to Title 24, and then the other overlays and all of the things that we're getting for the environmental attributes and benefits. The market responded very well. You can see this on the next slide. This chart shows the maturities that are shown in the hatched mark. So that's all of the little squares down at the bottom. The reason why the scale makes those so little is because we had such good performance and overwhelming support from the market. This shows that in each of the maturities, we were at or substantially beyond subscription. Subscription means we had orders to fill the number of bonds that were being offered to the market. When you have that experience, you have the opportunity to tell the market, you know what, the prices that we were showing you, those are not really what we're going to give you. We're going to lower those because there's so much demand that we have the ability to lower the rates. We did that across the entire curve here, and you can see it in the green boxes. So -5 means -5 basis points for those maturities. Those were the price adjustments in your favor. The -10 and -12.5 and -10 on the put bond, those were experienced as a matter of several different price adjustments during the course of the overall pricing. When we do a deal like this one, we offer it up to retail investors first. There's a retail priority period, and retail investors are told, if you put it in your orders, you will have priority to get those bonds first. So we offered up prices based upon that order period. Because of the overwhelming demand in the retail space, we lowered rates, and then we went out to the institutional environment. I mean individual investors and also professional retail too. So it was a combination. The results were a combination of those folks, and a subsequent slide here shows that. Turning to the next slide, this is, I won't go into a lot of detail, but this shows the support in the retail market. This is both Chair Cervantes, direct retail, so mom and pop, and also professional. That you can see the order flow here on an $85 million deal was $262 million. That's what really supported the ability of Cal HFA to experience the excellent rates that we were able to get. The institutional orders then, because there were so many orders that came in on retail, we told the market we were going to hold back 50% of the overall maturities to offer to institutions too. And the reason for that was to create natural tension so that we would be able to lower prices. Next couple of slides just give you a little bit more flavor. Basically, what ended up happening is the bonds were allocated more than 50% to retail and about 40% to institutional. How the retail orders flowed across the state, I always like to show this type of a slide just to show the overall impact on the sale. You had a lot of orders that were coming in from a lot of different parts of the state. I think over time, this will be interesting to track because this is also about getting buy-in from the community, from those mom and pop investors that are investing in their communities by buying these bonds. Next slide is about how the orders flowed in from the overall syndicate. So syndicate means you had different managers who were involved here. We were operating as the senior manager, so we led the transaction in terms of the pricing, but also in terms of the overall structure and working with the agency to come up with the best architecture to offer up to the market. The choices on the other syndicate members here were all good because you can see the orders came in from those members across the transaction. Sure.
To thank from the Treasurer's Office. We really do appreciate you not only showing the diversity of the investors that we have from different parts of the state, but also when it comes to the use of the Ramirez Company, minority-owned firm. I wouldn't say they're small by any stretch of the imagination, but we do need to start seeing more and more of that diversity investor when it comes to it, because exactly what you pointed out, which is they're a lot closer and tighter involved in their community. So again, appreciate the actions you guys taken there.
Yeah, and very much appreciate that, Director Henning. And Ramirez was an integral part of the process here. And having worked in the affordable housing business for as long as I have, and it's a long time, you get to know everybody. And I have to say that the bankers and the underwriting desk at Ramirez, they're excellent. So we were happy to have them in the syndicate working with us.
For the record, there is no relationship to.
Although it would be nice, I will tell you that.
So the next slide just gives you a flavor of the performance. And the performance here is really participation of a who's who of major institutional investors. We were thrilled to get this book. This book is focused on a diverse set of investors and a big one. One of the reasons why we're very excited about it is it really sets up for success going forward. On the next transaction, all of these folks will have already reviewed this credit, will understand it, and will have had that performance of these bonds in their portfolio when they start to look at that next sale, which they will be eager to see. We're talking about names like Vanguard, Invesco, PIMCO, Fidelity, BlackRock, Nuveen. It's all good, really, really good result. And as a result of all this success, what that means is we got the best price. And that's on the next slide. This is a comparison to comparable housing issues that were in the market in and around the same time. Notably, Cal Housing was up at the very same time frame with a transaction for Florida Housing. And Florida Housing, the Florida deal was a AAA single family deal, so slightly different, but very comparable. And you can see in the Florida comp that your deal priced 15, 13, 20, 18 basis points better than that AAA offering from the state of Florida. I would say that's pretty darn good. That's not a kind of a comp that is normal to see. And the reason why this performance was so strong is a couple of things. One, the size of the transaction was not substantial. It's an $85 million deal, so it was digestible by not only the retail environment, but the institutional environment as well. That was a great way to start out an overall indenture with something that is so wildly oversubscribed like this, that you get this good result, but it's also the basis of what we were selling. We were selling par bonds. Housing bonds are generally structured as par bonds, and the retail investors in the current market love par structures. They don't want to have a premium price structure. They like to see the coupon equaling the yield, and they also like the overall yields that you see. The yields that were offered here, if you're a retail investor and you can buy a 2038 term bond at 4 1/8, that's all tax exempt. It's also tax exempt, not only federally, but for California taxes too. So a really, really solid investment. The other aspect of the performance here is really driven off how we chose to structure the bonds too. We structured the bonds intentionally to get the best result in the market. And again, you can see this not only about Florida, but it's about Nebraska, Montgomery County, which is a marquee issuer in this space as well, North Carolina and Indiana. So really terrific results. And as Director Hall was talking about at the very beginning, Morgan Stanley loves doing these kinds of deals. And we love it because of the impact and because it aligns with the values of the firm. So much so that we used our electronic billboards in Times Square to put up the congratulatory statement to the agency, and really to have a round of applause by the community in New York to California for the accomplishment here. So again, really appreciate working with everybody, working with staff, the full team, and we would look forward to more to come. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions that you might have.
So this is fascinating, totally wonderful. One of the reasons why I wanted to join this board, my previous employer had a bunch of mortgages through College FA at a really high interest rate. College FA was able to get a much lower interest rate, and that difference wasn't shared with my previous employer, and that those properties weren't able to be refinanced, and there's all kinds of issues that went into it. I look at this and I see 100% PSH project in Santa Clara, 100% Section 8 vouchers, has the highest interest rate and is serving the lowest income people, and has the biggest spread between what bonds College FA was able to get and what that developer was able to get, which I'm like now wondering, we'll go back to that developer and say, like, why did you negotiate so poorly? Your interest rate is 1.75% higher than all of the other entities that were financed through this, right? And so I'm kind of curious now. I've got questions about, like, why is a PSH project like carrying more of its share? Why is a voucher project? Is it vouchers that are being, because again, it's a FHA risk sharing and 100% Section 8, and it has the highest interest rate. I'm like, that confuses me. And so it feels to me, this is, from the College FA side, I think it's amazing. From the end user side, I have questions about, like, what's the fairness that's happening there? And is that one particular project subsidizing another project that doesn't have risk sharing, has MIP, and doesn't have any kind of rental assistance? Those would be and I'm kind of curious from a policy point of view, like, is that fair and appropriate?
I mean, I'll just respond quickly to say that the important part to consider here is that the loans, as they were made, they all weren't made at the same time. So the rates that were assigned to the individual mortgages were done at that particular point in time. So really that's, I think that from my perspective, structuring bonds and thinking about other HFAs and how they run their program, because, for example, New York City has a similar tension when they're making their mortgage loans on projects similar to what you're talking about, is when they're not done at the same time, you can't make that differentiation. Plus it's programmatic too. The benefits of the overall program through MIP and all of the other subsidy sources are really what's driving the overall performance on the transaction itself. But I'll turn it over to Erwin too.
Sure. That's a great question, actually. And I think Jeff touched upon one of the variables that we use in terms of pricing. You'll see that in each of our multifamily term sheets, there is an indicative price. So one of the things that goes into it is in the current market, when we make a financial commitment in a rate, we look to when, what the current market is, what the projected market at conversion is. So some of these projects convert in 24 months, some of them will convert in 36 months. So that has a different pricing. We look at the size of the overall financing too. So that also is a factor that we use in terms of deciding that price. And so I think I've already touched. So it really depends on the overall market. So it's a little bit of apples to, or a lot of apples to oranges in this case. I can look in particular to see when that loan was committed to. But again, because what we do is we accrue all of the loans to be financed on our line of credit, and we take them all out with bonds at the same time. So they accrued over time. I think some of them converted actually. I think you were looking at the Lee Avenue one, if memory serves me right. The Lee Avenue one was the first to convert. So we held it on the line of credit for a year, waiting for the rest of these rest of the loans to convert. Right.
And I first to convert and got the highest rate.
Yeah, because it was also made the earliest, right? So then therefore it was probably the 20, I assume that this was, I'm just speaking from memory here, which hopefully is right. But yeah, it was made in the 2019 probably time period, whereas the other loans were probably made in the 2020 time period. And as you know, the interest rate environment was different in 2019 than it was in 2020.
Other questions? I know
So this.
Director Wright just deleted. Oh.
Thank you for the
How's that?
presentation. A question, how are we comparing to other HFAs in, like in the United States, like from the performance perspective and rating? I just want to know if there's a correlation between the risk that HFAs take and their bond and like us not being a private bank, essentially, and being like more of socially minded entity. Is there any risk, like any correlation between that? And
I can start. I think that CalHFA operates pretty uniquely amongst all the other state HFAs. We are, I think Jeff touched upon New York State HFA and probably our counterparts in New York City HDC. They receive, their multifamily lending is by right. They don't go through a competitive process, much like we do at SIDLAC, so that's different. I think versus private lenders, we're able to borrow at a tax-exempt rate. So that's probably our cost of capital, again, is slightly different than, a private lender that a development would be funded at. So I think those are, at least in my mind, are some of the key differentials. I think Jeff may have some more ideas.
Yeah, and I think how I would think about this just generally speaking, and what we were looking to do from the onset is because there has been a fair amount of activity in the multifamily market over the last 10 years, here we said we need to look at this and take best practices across that experience. Our work across the country, we work with all of the largest issuers of multifamily bonds across the country. So we knew where to look there. And we also were very deliberate in tapping the lawyers that we were working with too, in constructing the trust indenture so that we will manage risk going forward. That corresponds to with the rating that we were looking to achieve too. We could have gone for a lower rating threshold or a higher rating threshold, but wanted to have really what was, and I talked about it as being a sweet spot. What is that sweet spot that we're going after? And it was that AA to AA level. I mean, I would say at this point, when we're looking at CalHFA versus others, we're in a spot where we now will be able to lever off all of the resources that are being put into these individual loans, which is, I would think about that as nothing but good.
other HFAs in this state?
On the risk threshold and overall point of view is very similar. And we were looking to make it such. And we were looking to position to maximize the performance, similar to how performance has been experienced in other places over the period of the last 10, 15 years.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
I would like to thank Jeff Prue for coming all the way from New York to be here, and also Adam, who's in the back, who traveled from San Francisco. Thank you as well. Also want to thank my team who put in a tremendous amount of work. Don't miss the fact that we started this almost a year and a half, 2 years ago. This is the process that we started in making sure that our governance, our policies, our risk associated with this was properly attended to and vetted. So congratulations, and also to the work of the multifamily program itself for actually bringing in the deals to start with. That was that whole process, just remind the board, happened 4 or 5 years ago when we entered into the MIP program to begin with. That has been the impetus for taking us to a level where we haven't seen or been before, and also will catapult us in the future for where we can go. So very grateful to the Director of Multifamily Housing Programs, Kate Ferguson, for your work. Also want to recognize the person who put in a lot of the risk and together with Erwin Tam on the financial, that would be Rebecca, who's sitting in the back quietly, and also our legal team, who's represented here by Claire. All of these folks worked together to ensure that we got to where we are, and they did a phenomenal job, obviously, which was, we received, this response is overwhelming to me. I literally got chills having sat on the banking side and really worried about how we might be perceived after a 10-year hiatus. And I think what this shows is we're seen favorably, quite favorably, 5-1. And we beat Florida. Heck yeah. I'm all in. So thank you again for your attendance today.
So we'll have the public comment questions in a second. I just wanted to echo what Tina was saying. We're looking at the all-in true interest cost at a 316. I know that there's a put bond in there and you front loaded it, but I mean, a true interest cost is like an APR on a home loan. So that's a pretty attractive cost of funds in almost any market, especially the one we're in now. So well done on the structuring side. And I also note, and this is like slide 12 in my deck, the treasurer here, I'm sure she would have picked up on this right away, which is I really have to salute the underwriting team for the amount of the retail support that is real human beings and their advisors who put in for a substantial load of the bond. So I think that's a terrific marketing effort. And if I were living my old life, I would have felt really happy with this kind of a financing where the structure's creative, the general fund's off the hook. You sort of like gave the investors what they needed in terms of rating by, in effect, over collateralizing with a special reserve fund, a really attractive borrowing cost, and a really robust reception in the market. So I think you hit all the sweet spots on this. So I think job well done. I really appreciate the effort that staff did in this, because it's been over a year. And I'm sure at some point you probably felt this would never get done. But it's great to be here in the room and get the debrief from you all. Looking forward to the next one that you get in the market. So thank you all. And let me see if there's any questions from the public or public comment. Melissa, I'll ask you to probe the Zoom world and see what we've got out there. See if there's any interest.
If members of the public are viewing and would like to make a comment at this time, please raise your hand and we'll call upon you. We don't see any raised hands at this time.
Great, thank you. Mr. Tam, Mr. Prue, thank you both very much. And we'll go to item 8, which is informational written reports in the back of the package. I'd like to see if there's any topics in there that members of the board would like to have staff expand on in the materials provided.
I don't have a question. I have a comment. I really appreciate the opportunity for the staff to reach out to the members of the board to have conversation prior to the board meeting. I think being able to at least understand what's before us, and if we have any questions or areas of clarification, I just want to say thank you. That is very helpful, and I think it really prepares us to be engaged and informed as we sit here and hear and are asked to make decisions. So I just want to comment on how much I appreciate the opportunity to do that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, I think we're moving to item number 9, which is other board matters. I made a few notes during this during the session. There's some conversations that Tina had about a workshop, sort of framing the idea along, what are things out there that we might be doing to further enhance housing. It kind of picks up on a theme that Director Prince raised earlier. So, but are there any other topics maybe for a future meeting that individuals have? And you could touch base with me or with our executive director later, but just want to put that out there. We can revisit that at the next session too. So just frame that. That moves us to item 10, which is public comment. And I want to acknowledge that we have received some printed emailed public comment. I want to thank the members of the public for sharing their thoughts with us, and we'll also take a good look at that. But I'd like to see if there's any members of the public out there now on the Zoom platform that might have something like to raise with the board. So maybe Melissa, if you could see if there's someone out there who wants to make a comment from the public that's dialed into this program.
Yes, and before I do that, I just wanted to say briefly too, the written comments that we received were provided and posted on the board website, so everyone can view those. If anyone is interested in making public comment at this time, please raise your hand. Okay, there are no hands raised at this time.
Thank you very much. And with that, we reached the last item, which is adjournment. So I'd like to thank you all, the members of the board, especially those who've trekked up here for this board meeting, and for members of the staff. And we'll be meeting in October on the 26th in Burbank. So looking forward to a change in venue. Although frankly, this is a pretty nice setup here.
Thank you, teacher.
I could get spoiled. So thank you all. Meeting's adjourned.
Good job, Chair.
Thank you for that.
Okay.